You guys ready? We're back in session. There was another person on general public comment that had signed up to speak on ranked choice voting, and he is Stefan Baca.
Hello, good evening, Council. I'm Stephen Baca. I'm running in Council District 2 against Isaac Benton. Voting, I don't have an opinion on it. The issue I have is that we're passing it in the middle of an election cycle. I called Minnesota, all these cities that all the proponents say, Maine, Seattle, none of those cities passed it during an election year. None of them. Pete Dinelli did an article on this. He titled it, Councilor Pat Davis and Isaac Benton. It's my job to make sure that I win. And that's absolutely what this sounds like. This is complete and utter cheating beyond belief. Changing an election process in the middle of an election is just completely unethical and wrong. The proponents say that they believe in democracy, but they don't want to allow democracy to let this process happen. They want to take away the voters' right to choose how they choose candidates. I am completely against this by ordinance, and we should allow the voters to have that say. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are on 054, Councilor Benton, Davis, and/or Winter.
Madam President, I believe Councilor Gibson has an amendment first, if that's right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a floor amendment, number 1 to 054. On page 2, line 32, strike the term 2019 and replace with 2021. And the explanation for this is that this amendment will change the date that ranked choice voting system commences from the November 2019 regular municipal election to the November 2021 regular municipal election.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. Did you want to explain it?
I think it's.
Okay, Councilor Harris.
Yes, I might vote for that because it's better than the bill currently, but here's a problem with that, is that if we pass that ordinance, it then essentially preempts the charter question, so then we're still doing an end run around the voters. Here's the problem, is that if we pass it as an ordinance, then the ordinance says we're going to do it in 2021, and then at that point we might have an advisory question with regard to the proposition. I suppose maybe if the Secretary of State allows us to put it and pass the charter amendment, and if it fails, maybe we could repeal the ordinance, I don't know. Maybe we could pass the charter amendment as well as the ordinance. I don't know. I have to ask the city attorney. Could we do both? I mean, if the ordinance passes tonight saying 2021, then could we put the proposition before the voters?
Madam President, Councilor Harris, there would be an inherent conflict there. So I'm happy to look into that and break it down and discuss that with you after, outside of the meeting. But if you have any other specific questions, I'm happy to answer those relating to the bill.
Okay, here's the question, is that Councilor Gibson wants to change the ordinance to say it's going to become effective 2021. And then we have a proposition on the table that would say that the charter is changed to make it ranked choice voting in 2021. So could we at that point even put the charter before the voters, because at that point it might even be a advisory question, but then we could repeal the ordinance and the charter. And so, I'd rather just do it by a charter amendment, not ordinance, but I'm kind of wondering how this all works. I guess the clerk is up there to maybe give her ideas.
Madam President, Councilor Harris, I'll defer on that particular question to the city clerk.
Madam President, Councilor Harris, I think at that point it would be an advisory question, and with the changes at the state level, we're no longer allowed to put purely advisory questions on the ballot. Now, if the ordinance was repealed, then it would not be an advisory question. But
here's kind of a counter argument, is that, well, maybe we're just changing the charter as a backstop in case we repeal it or not. Yeah, it's interesting. It becomes an interesting question. I think we should just go with the proposition because the ordinance actually creates issues if we amend it this way, at least in my mind.
Steve?
Madam President, Councilor Harris, either way, the state has made clear that it has entered the field with passing the Local Election Act, so the state has superseded all, our city procedures, and they need to be, to the extent they're inconsistent, that's when the council and the clerk can take action.
So, Mr. Aguilar, I think, so are we saying that if we pass 054, that Councilor Harris's Proposition 3 is actually null and void, for lack of a better word?
Or it might be illegal or something. Go ahead.
Again, Madam President, I'll defer to the clerk on that particular question.
Madam President, I think so, as long as we have an ordinance in place that implements ranked choice voting. While that is in place, I don't think the city could put a question on the ballot that also addressed that same issue.
Okay, any questions? Councilor Sanchez?
Thank you, Madam President. I like the fact that the amendment will basically now say that there is no conflict of interest, because I felt with the current legislation, and I was very conflicted with it because I felt that you can't change the rules in the middle of an election. I mean, the expectation of these voters coming in expect the rules that are in place to be in place when they are running for the office. Districts 2, 4, 6, and 8 are now up for re-election, and there are candidates that are running. I know in Councilor Davis's place, it won't make any difference because there are 2 candidates. But let's keep in mind, back in March 11th of 2013, there was a special election that went to the voters. 57,939 voters in this city voted on this mail-in ballot, and this was in reference to before you needed 40% or more to win the election without a runoff. And the citizens of Albuquerque went out and said, we want to increase that number to 50%. To be elected to office, you should have the majority. And 32,055 people, which was 55.33% of the voters, voted to make sure that the percentage went up from 50% to 40%. I mean, they voted for the runoffs, and basically that's why we have runoffs today, because if you didn't have 50%, you were going to be in a runoff. And I know that there is a cost to the runoffs, and I have no problems with ranked choice voting. I think it's a good thing for Albuquerque and local and municipal elections. I just think the timing, especially with that amendment in there, was really problematic, because I think it's a direct conflict of interest, and I don't think the rules should be changed during the middle of an election cycle.
Councilor Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Councilor Sanchez, thank you for bringing that up. That was one of the points I was going to make, that, you know, whether it's real or perceived or not even an issue, the fact that we do have 3 councilors who are in races that will appear on this upcoming ballot is enough to, you know, push a little bit of a discussion on that. If we could vote on this, and there's no way that we can do this, at least with an ordinance, there's no way we can do that without councilors voting on that. So I think the best thing that we can do is vote on it now, delay it for 2 years, as this amendment does, and then it'll go into effect in 2 years. The other thing that I was thinking about is that even when we think that we've done the right thing and it's an open and shut case, simple, straightforward, it's happened before. We found out, oh, there was something that we overlooked or did not contemplate. And this would give us, you know, a window, you know, to adjust for anything that, you know, might be a problem, potentially pose a problem. For example, I learned, thank you, Madam Clerk, about, you know, there's more than just the classic interpretation of ranked choice voting. And there's one that you proposed, which seemed like a really good idea, too. And the language on the bill, I think, could leave a little bit of interpretation, but I understand now, thanks to you, that this is the intent of the sponsors, is to use the classic approach. The other thing, Dr. Bearshield made a really good point here, I think earlier, and other people, he was one of them, but education of voters, in order to do this and make sure that we have people on board, I think that's worth looking at for the next 2 years. So, I like ranked choice voting. I like what it does. I like the convenience. I like the fact that it saves us a second election. But I think that in this case, it's better to put things off just a little bit and make sure that we're doing it correctly. So I urge your support. It might be too early to urge your support, but I will again after this.
Councillor Davis, followed by Councillor Winter, followed by Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. For what it's worth, I'm going to oppose this amendment because I don't think I think we can implement this currently. Were this amendment to fail, the amendment to pass, I'll still vote for the full bill because I think ranked choice voting is the right thing to do. But let me tell you why I think we ought to do it now. Earlier tonight, all of us voted unanimously without any discussion at all on the rules of this upcoming election in 2019. We picked sort of an arbitrary, although we were giving some choices, and we sort of ranked them in the committee and about what was the right option. We picked a date for the runoff in the middle of December, and different candidates may or may not have a different opinion on whether that benefits an incumbent or a challenger, or how that election would be administered. And we've heard some different answers from the county clerk about how their thought process on this has evolved over time and what the charge back to the city might be, absent some intervening rules from the Secretary of State, perhaps. But to me, the runoff rules really don't take effect until we have a runoff. And so earlier tonight, we sort of voted to set an election day and a runoff day. To me, ranked choice voting is pretty simple. Essentially, this council is electing to pick the election and the runoff day on the same date, at the same election, in the same poll, on the same ballot with voters. And that's all we're simply asking is tell us your first choice, and if there's a second, go ahead. I think it, contrary to that false narrative, ranked choice voting isn't an incumbent protection program. Runoffs traditionally are, however, because they really ensure that people with a stronger name ID and a stronger sort of base of support can turn those folks out. But something really resonated with me earlier, and then I'll pause, Madam President. I heard Daniel say, I don't see him anymore, but I heard Daniel say earlier, bringing up a really good point, that some people contemplating running for office are often told not to because they might be a spoiler or because they would divide a party and allow an opposition to take office. We've all run for different offices. We've all won and lost different things, I think, at different points. The candidates that are most often told not to run are those that are younger, working families, people that don't have enough money to run independently, minority candidates. It's Pride Month LGBT candidates, for example, particularly women of color who check all those boxes. Ranked choice voting gives those folks a real chance to run a campaign, to be viable, to build coalitions and do that work, and I think that helps democracy an awful lot better. So for that said, we have not yet encumbered any extra funds for the runoff, at least certainly not enough to operate a runoff. And so if we don't implement this in 2019, and we hear from the city clerk that we can, we're going to have to make a decision about what police officers we cut, what park maintenance we cut, what senior centers we close or defer. Something somewhere's got to give in order to have an election where the outcome is already sort of decided or could have been decided without any extra money. And to me, that just makes sense. So, Councilor Gibson, I appreciate your amendment. I appreciate your support for ranked choice voting. I just think we can do it now, and I'll vote against it. But were this amendment to pass, I'll vote for that as well. Thank you.
Councillor Winter? Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I'm kind of torn on this. I think I'm going to vote against the amendment because, and the reason why is because I think it should go to the voters, and not bypass the voters. If we're going to wait 2 years, let's let the voters own it, and let's let them decide how they vote. And the amendment that was provided by the city clerk is, on this issue is actually very, I don't know if you want to hand it out for my proposition. It's actually very detailed. It talks about a procedure that the city clerk would engage in and prepare, subject to the Secretary of State rules and regulations regarding ranked choice voting. The city clerk shall make recommendations to City Council required ranked choice methodology by or before January 1, 2020. The clerk's recommendation shall be adopted upon approval of the majority of the council members. So I think that kind of sets up a system for us to go forth and work on ranked choice in 2021. If the voters pass it, give the voters a chance to pass it. People who support ranked choice voting say it's very popular. And if that's the case, then it should pass, and that way the voters have bought into it.
Any other speakers? Counselor Benton.
Well, when the advocates came to speak to me about this, I don't think I had an opponent yet. Maybe I had one. Don't remember now. But regardless of how the race in District 2 has unfolded, I was convinced back then, when the advocates came to speak to me, that this was the right way to go. My sense from about my district is that my constituents would like to see this pass and like to see it implemented this year. I don't know whether it helps or hurts me. I have no idea. The indications from the statistics that I asked about is that it really has no effect on an incumbent one way or the other. So the easy thing for me to do would be to vote for this amendment so that I take myself out of any consideration. But I think as Councilor Davis mentioned, we just finished voting on a whole bunch of provisions having to do with, I believe, not just this, but I think the expectation would be future elections where other councilors might be up for re-election. And I just feel like this is the right thing to do now. And I'll stand behind my decision. I'm not making it in any way to benefit my race.
Counselor Borrego.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, I think that voting is a basic right for every individual, and in a democracy, it's a basic right, like eating and drinking water and, you know, I really believe it's a basic right, and people have fought for generations, women, you know, all sorts of people for their right to vote. And while I'm not opposed to ranked choice voting, I just think that based on some of the discussion, and keep in mind that counselors hear what we hear at our meetings, but we also receive texts and emails and letters, and so we've heard on both sides of this issue. And I did a little mini survey because, you know, I wanted to hear from some of the viejitos, like little old Hispanics, and I asked them what they thought about, and I showed them I had a little video that somebody sent me that showed me how it worked, because I actually was confused to begin with myself. And, you know, it didn't seem that difficult to me, but then when I showed it to some of these elderly people, and that was my own little survey, because I just called them up and asked them what they thought or met with them. And they said, "Mijita, ¿por qué quieres cambiar? You know, why do we want to change?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. This is just something that's being proposed. What do you think?" You know, and I talked to them in Spanish. And I mean, right there and then it told me that they didn't agree with it. They said, you know, "Why are we changing? I won't go vote." And I talked to a lot of people on both sides of this issue, and I've mentioned to them about these conversations that I've had. And, you know, that's why I brought up the whole issue about Santa Fe and the population and so on and so forth, because it seems to me like even within, the position that I sit in and educating myself, I really didn't understand it to begin with. And I had to educate myself. And I think I'm pretty, I mean, I think I'm not a dumb person, I don't think, but, I think the education, and it was raised tonight about the Native Americans, and there's Asian populations, and there's all sorts of huge populations in Albuquerque. And so if people are confused and they decide, we implement it, and then they go to vote, and they get discouraged, we're taking away their basic voting right without an education process in place. And I don't feel like that education process has occurred. I think the timing is, a little strange, and I think some people would think, this timing is a little bit off, and it was said tonight a couple of times. And, any perception of impropriety or or us doing something wrong to the public is not just a perception. I mean, those perceptions go on, and they multiply, and they get bigger, and then, it's like, oh yeah, the council's doing something again, that's not good. Why can't we take the time to educate people and let them understand it in all communities across the city, and create an election cycle if we are going to, in fact, implement ranked choice voting, have people participate in that process. And the other thing that really concerns me is this whole thing about the charter, because in my education and my experience, you usually take care of the charter, and then you do you take care of the policy, and then you do the process. And it seems like we're kind of doing the reverse. So for those reasons, I think the timing is off on this, and I'm not opposed to maybe in the future, but I think there are a lot of things that really need to happen before I can support it.
Thank you. I just want to say for myself is that, I really think it's an interesting concept. I think it's something that I'm not necessarily opposed to. I just don't think that it's something that, we need at this time. When we look back at, when I first was elected in 2013, one of the challenges I had was because of public financing, which was a new mechanism, that it was actually harder for me to run and take the public financing, because in an area like mine, you actually get less money. Each of us counselors represent pretty much the same population with a deviation of about 5%. Yet some counselors, when they run based on the number of registered voters, you actually get a higher, because it's you get $1 per registered voter. Unfortunately, in my district, there's a lot less registered voters than other districts. So where one counselor might get 40,000, the first time I ran, I think it was like 22,000 or something like that. So for me, one of the challenges is how do I reach out to the voter base, and how do I get people engaged and wanting to be part of this process? It's been a challenge of mine for a long time now, because I don't want to just use those dollars to advocate to the persons that are registered to vote, but I wanted to reach out to the broader base. And so since I ran for re-election, and I was really encouraged, because throughout this process and the elections since, and even some county elections, the numbers in my district in particular have increased pretty significantly. I'm pretty proud, actually, of the people that are in my community wanting to come out and vote, And somebody said, I don't think, someone was saying that, in areas, and talking about underserved areas, I get very, I'm a pretty stickler about how people describe it. And it's not that we aren't smart in some areas, or that the viejitos aren't smart. They're very smart, and very similar to Councilor Borrego. I went out to the community and talked to the community, and they didn't say they were confused. Some of them did, but some of them said, you know what? You asked, as Councilor Sanchez said, you asked us to, in 2013, you asked us to vote for 50% because you wanted the majority. And we did. We said we wanted the 50%. What came with that? That came with the price tag of a runoff election. Then you told me you want me to give you $5 to run. You want your signatures plus you want $5 and go to each door and knock for $5. Then you want us to do the democracy dollars, and you want to add that as a layer. And then you also, now you want to do the ranked choice voting. You know, I think that it creates not an educated voters. I think it creates voter confusion in this time where we need people to just come out and vote. And like I said, in 2013, we voted for a majority, and that came with the runoff. And I think we need to stick with what the citizens said at that time. And ranked choice voting is actually, it's an electoral college system. I know some of us, you know, we get very upset. Somebody used the analogy earlier about a cherry, a watermelon, and a lemon, you know. And with ranked choice voting, you vote for, you go and you do your votes, and you do vote 1, 2, 3, and you go to bed and you vote, and you see that the cherry won at 49%, the watermelon at 38%, and the lemon at 13%. But with ranked choice voting and the automatic runoff, the next morning you can wake up to learn that that the watermelon won. I mean, I think that really can confuse a voter. And for those reasons and several others, I really don't, I really can't support the ranked choice voting at this time. Councillor Gibson.
Madam President, I think we need to vote on the amendment.
So, it's Councillor Gibson's amendment, so.
All right, so just a couple of things that I heard I want to address. First of all, the election rules change started in December, as Councillor Davis said. That is kind of making my point for me, because we've had from December until this time to work on that. And so the same thing should apply for this. You know, not only does it give us sort of an arm's length from people who are running this year, as opposed to in 2 years from now, we can make the decision now, and you know, nobody has to, you know, feel like they're making a decision based on their own race, impending race. The other thing I heard was something about ranked choice voting, giving non-traditional candidates a better chance. I don't see that happening. What gives non-traditional candidates a better chance is not ranked choice voting. That's public financing. So, you know, this is a real simple amendment, and I think that it solves a lot of things that have been talked about this evening, and I would urge your support. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand. Yes. Opposed, no? You got it? Okay. So now we are, it failed, sorry. I mean, it passed, sorry. That was my fault, passed. So we are back on the bill, and Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I've been hearing everyone very passionately speak about ranked choice voting tonight, and I appreciate your point, and I really appreciate the fact that you say you really want to vote, and this is your opportunity to vote, and you don't want your vote to be wasted, and that is marvelous. But at the same time, the majority of you said, and if we can't do it this way and there's a runoff, we probably won't be able to go vote again. And that is the part that troubles me the most. The way I grew up was, and I've learned and tried to practice this, it is a privilege and an honor to get to vote. And even more than that, it's an obligation. And if we can't find the time, or for whatever reason can't vote, we have mail-in votes, we have votes before the election date, we've made so many concessions and change things enough so it's pretty hard to not get to vote. So I'm concerned about the fact that if we don't do it this way, that people aren't going to vote, and yet I hear that if we do it this way, people won't vote, and I can't comprehend that at all. It is our obligation as free citizens of the United States of America to register to vote and to vote. So with that, that's all I need to say here. I just think some of our arguments against this or for this are maybe a little misplaced. Thank you, Madam President.
Councillor Winter, followed by Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. And this is a tough one, and I did not agree that it should be on this ballot because I think there needs to be a lot of education that happens with the residents and my residents in District 4. In saying that, now we pushed it down the road a little bit, and sometimes through my years working with the council, I have trouble supporting something that maybe a different council should vote on. So I'm making a decision for another council, and the fact that we are going to have a different council, at least one councilor, and that would be me, is not going to be here, and we could have more. And so this is tough. And so now we've kind of have two issues, whether push it down the road, and basically it would give another council time to look at it and either support it or not support it, or then go with the other. The other one is about have the voters vote on this. And there's issues on both sides. I think when you have the voters vote on it, and I always support going to the voters, but this is kind of a new thing. If something happens, then you can't make, if there's unintended consequences, sometimes it's tough to make changes without going back to the voters. So it's kind of a dilemma right now, but those are some of the issues that I'm looking at, and what do we do?
Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. As I stated earlier, I did support the amendment. I do have concerns, though, regarding the voters in 2013, when 57,939 voters went out and said they wanted to change a charter and make this 50%. I don't believe that I can disenfranchise those 57,000 voters that went out for that election on March 11th of 2013. And if this goes to the voters, I will definitely be supporting ranked choice voting. But I believe that it should not be the 9 members of this council that should make that decision. It should be the residents of the city of Albuquerque that make that decision. And I believe they will make the right choice. But it'll give the proponents, Common Cause and other groups, the opportunity to go out and educate the public on the importance of ranked choice voting. But again, that should be up to the voters to make that final decision. So in 2021, if they support it, ranked choice voting will be in place for the mayoral race and the 5 city council districts. And if they oppose it, then we must respect the will of the voters.
Okay, well, with that, I think we will go to Benton, Davis, and Winter to close. Councillor Benton.
Yes, I do still think that this is the right way to go. As an elected representative for my district, I want to represent my district, and I'll be supporting this, but it doesn't look like we're going to have the votes tonight. So, but I just want to thank the advocates for all of your work and all the time you spent out here tonight. I know some opponents as well. But I think this is the right way to go. It's the way we need to be going in the future. And we can't put everything up for a public ballot. And sometimes we should make a tough decision here on our own. Urge your support.
With that, there's a motion and a second for O54 as amended. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand. Yes. All those opposed say no and raise your hand. 5-4 fails. With that, we will now move on to Councillor Harris, P3.
Thank you, Madam President. I move a due pass of P3 19-3. Second. And I'd like to call up the city clerk, and I want to chat with her about, because I just did an amendment on the fly to your amendment. What the city clerk said on page 3, line 10, strike the term municipal and replace with local. On page 3, line 10, strike the term 2019 and replace 2021. page 3, lines 13 through 23, and replace the following, and I kept most of it, but I'll just go ahead and read it. Office appearing on the ballot, the city council shall adopt an ordinance implementing ranked choice voting runoff election pursuant to NMSA 1978-1-2216, which will preempt any existing city ordinance, city charter provision governing the same. A ranked choice runoff election shall be conducted in the same ballot as the regular local election and allow voter to rank the candidates for an office in the voter's preferred order. Subject to Secretary of State rules and regulations regarding ranked choice voting, the city clerk shall make recommendation to the city council regarding ranked choice methodology on or before January 1, 2020. The city clerk's recommendation, and I changed the word shall to may be adopted upon approval by a majority of the city council members. A copy of the ordinance shall be filed with the Secretary of State in accordance with the requirements of NMSA 1978, Section 12216C. And then I added a sentence. Tell me what you think of this, Madam Clerk. The council may modify by ordinance the methodology prior to each municipal election.
Madam President, Councilor Harris, I think that is council's prerogative. I would worry about changing methodologies too often just to avoid voter confusion, but
Sure.
I think it's good for the city to have the flexibility to adjust the system if the need arises.
And I think it's still, changing the shall to may, what it does is it recognizes your authority as the clerk to make recommendations. But with the shall, it kind of required us to adopt them. So I think I like the may, so we can not necessarily do what you want, but it's sort of presumed that we will. Okay, so with that, I'd like to move floor amendment number 1.
There's a motion, a second for floor.
Okay.
Madam President,
I
and
read that
Councilor
again?
Harris, can you read that last sentence that you added?
The last sentence said, "The council may modify by ordinance the methodology prior to each municipal election." And that gives us the flexibility that I think we need.
Okay, there's a motion, a second for floor amendment number 1. All those in.
Madam President,
Yep.
my apologies.
Counselor Davis.
If I could just ask a procedural question to sort of catch us all up here, that's okay. This being a proposition going to voters, generally that requires 2 hearings. I know
Sure.
we did one at the last meeting.
But that doesn't count.
Right.
Because if we amend it, this is the
That-
first hearing, so we'd have to defer it.
That was what I was going to make, that was what I was to clarify. So if we amend this tonight, it will require us to defer this until August, where we'll have a rehearing, is that right?
Exactly, yep.
Okay. And that said, Madam President, I'm not sure I think this should go to voters. I think it's something we can do. That said, I'll vote for the amendment because I think the sponsor should have the bill he wants to present in August, so. thank you.
Okay. And I think we could potentially pass this in the second meeting in August. We shouldn't. But if anyone has a better idea on how this should read, we could actually amend it again in the first meeting in August, then have the final hearing in the last meeting in August, and the city clerk is nodding her head that we could. So if anyone else wants to work on this some more, we can, but I think this works pretty well.
Counselor Benton.
Just another question, perhaps for the sponsor, perhaps for the city clerk, or perhaps for legal. If we amend it based on this amendment, and we are required then to, I think it's a significant change from what you had before, could there be any minor amendment on the first meeting in August, or no?
As long as we defer it again.
A word or two here or there, along the lines of what you were just talking about, Councilor Harris?
I don't know. I think that's a Mr. Aguilar question.
Madam President, councilors, let me get back to you on that. I'm looking into it real quick.
Okay, well, we're doing that.
How about, Madam
Yes.
President, how about hearing from Madam Clerk?
Madam President, Councilor, I think if you do any amendment to it in the second public hearing, you are required to then have a third hearing. So I think you would want to do your amendments preferably tonight, as opposed to at that first hearing in August. One other thing, Councilor Harris, you might consider in saying that you could make changes before each municipal election. I would recommend that you put in a deadline to make those changes. So say 90 days, it has to be done by 90 days before the election.
6 months?
Or six, sure, I think whatever council thinks is appropriate, but just so that we're not running into a situation where immediately before the election, these changes are being made.
I like 6 months personally. Does anyone? Okay, so the last sentence shall read, the council may modify by ordinance the methodology 6 months prior to each municipal election. Okay.
So are we good to go on the amendment then? So on floor amendment 1, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Did we vote on this already?
No,
No,
not
we
yet.
didn't, huh? All those in favor, say yes and raise your hand.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, no? And raise your hand, 2? We weren't sure. See, we had voter confusion here. So I think what we'll
You
do
know what,
right
I want to
now-
do something. We got other stuff in the, what I'd like to do is move to table this and have the city clerk come up with a really bomb amendment that she really likes. Can you do that?
Okay, why don't we
Okay.
do that?
All
So
right.
do we, wait, so do we
And
have
move
to
to table?
withdraw the, do I have to,
Okay.
wait, I think we have to unvote it.
No. Amendment passed.
I move to reconsider. We can also do a second
Ms.
amendment
Yada,
anyway, right?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
it doesn't matter. We can.
Ms. Yada,
Yeah,
excuse me.
Madam President, Councilors, so you can move to, rescind this amendment, or you can wait until you hear from Mr. Aguilar and make a
Okay.
different amendment, if that's the will of the council.
Okay, so we can just wait.
Okay.
We can just wait. So I'd actually like to go while we're
I'd
doing
like to
that.
move a table.
Yeah,
Ms.
we
Bill?
have to vote in the
Oh,
table.
well, I actually want to go to public comment right now.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
we have 2 speakers signed up, Rick Weiner and Lucille Long. It hasn't been tabled. It has not been tabled. And Rick is no longer here?
Yeah, no, my name, I'm Rich Wiener.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Lucille Long? Okay.
No, I signed up to speak on the question of the ballot measure in the event that the ordinance did not pass. I'm very disappointed that the ordinance didn't pass and we can't get it for this year. But in the spirit of ranked choice voting, putting it on the ballot now is my second choice. So I would urge you to put it on the ballot right away, and let's get it done sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Lucille Long.
Good evening, President Pena and councilors. I'm Lucille Long from the Nob Hill area, and I want to commend you, and I really, really know that this is difficult because there are a lot of people wanting to support this. And I just want to say that the question is not whether ranked choice voting has merit and whether or not it's effective. The fact is that voting is our fundamental right as U.S. citizens, and that since it is a fundamental right and part of our democracy, then I believe that the best thing that can happen is that we do take it back to the voters. So, Councilor Harris, good for you, because I know it's difficult to have courage to stand up when something's popular. But we've seen a lot of votes sometimes go towards things that are popular, and then they land up being so unpopular. So I appreciate your time, and I commend all of you for your hard work on both sides.
Thank you. So do we have something yet, or should we? Mr. Aguilar.
Madam President, so Councilor Harris, would you clarify the question one more time, just so I can make sure that I understood correctly, because I think I have the answer for you.
The question, well, I think we were going to table it so that the clerk could come up with because what we wanted to do is the way the language that the clerk had written, it had shall, I think we can change that to may, I think we kind of agree with that. But the way this is written, it seems like we just have one crack at it. We get it done, we file it by January 1, 2020, and that's it. I wanted to be clear that we have flexibility because we'll use the 2021 election, we'll see how that works, and then, you know, before each election, we can tweak it or massage it. I just want to make sure that the language is clear about that.
President Pena, Council Harris, before each election or the petition to amend the charter?
Pardon me?
Because are you speaking about the procedure to amend the charter? Because that requires the 2 hearings.
Oh, 2 hearings.
Yeah,
Okay,
and amendments can be made under the city charter. So,
sorry,
so if amendments are made at the first hearing, or at the first time it's heard, there is no requirement to have a third.
Okay.
If those amendments are made at the second public hearing, then the council is required to hold a third hearing on those changes. So this would be the first.
But if we tweak it a little bit in the first meeting in August, we have to have a 4th, essentially, right?
A third, that would be the second time this particular piece would have been heard.
So if we tweak it in August, we would have to move it to, we'd still have to, we could pass it and tweak it, or continue to the last meeting in August?
There's only 3 hearings. So if there is an amendment that's passed in August, that would require a third hearing. If those amendments come through tonight, then the second hearing would be, the council could act on at that meeting.
Okay, I think we're, okay.
So I think we're still not clear, so would you like to table it for a minute?
Sure, I think, let me make sure, let me read. So I think what they're all saying is that if we don't get it right tonight, and we realize we want to fix it a little bit more in the first meeting in August, that puts us to the last meeting in August, which is cutting it close. We all agree on that?
Madam President, Council Harris, I don't know the council schedule. It would require an additional hearing. It doesn't.
Okay.
A hearing in front of the public. It doesn't have to be at a regular council meeting. Council certainly could call a special meeting with the appropriate vote.
Okay, thanks. So I'd still like to table it.
Second?
So there's a motion and a second to table this item. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on item F. Counselor Sanchez, R164.
Thank you, Madam President. This is R64 concerning a bond election to be held in the city of Albuquerque at the next regular local election on November the 5th, 2019, submitting to a vote of the qualified electors at such regular local elections certain questions for authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in varying principal amounts and for specified public purposes, and providing the form of the bond questions and the designation clause for such questions on the ballot. I move a do pass.
There's a motion and a second for a due pass. Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe that this is the one that we put on the ballot for the CIP budget.
That is correct.
And one of the issues that I am questioning is, we were specific when we passed the budget, there would be $14 million for public safety and for a housing.
For the
And I would like to see that, please, put as a separate item for the voters to see. We made it very clear that this should be something that the voters would know about, and I would like to have that pulled out of, I'm assuming it's coming out of the $21,705, or $21,705. I think it would be appropriate for the voters to be able to see that the $14 million for homeless shelter should be seen by the voters what it is.
Let's go and ask the administration.
I'm trying to.
Ms. Nair or Mr. Rayo?
Council President Pena, Councilor Jones, Councilor Sanchez, you know, we have a variety of resource-intensive projects in this particular bond cycle, including the Marpolo Arno pump station, the rail yards, the homeless facility. These have been debated at length in the public, and we don't necessarily want to see a trend of calling these all out individually. I don't think that that's the way that we historically have ever done this GO bond program. However, you know, this is a question for the council to decide.
Counselor Sanchez, Counselor Jones, sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand that, Ms. Nair, and I appreciate what you're saying, but this was something specific that we did. We've allocated money for homeless shelter specifically, and we have no way of tracking that. And I think the public needs to know what we're doing and why, because they were in favor of it. They helped us do it. They understand the issues that we have in the city, and I believe that they need to say where it is. And it has obviously been put in different pockets of money, and it would be very easy to pull it out of some of those and identify it specifically for this, so that we know what the voters know, what they're voting on this. And I would request that we do that.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm curious again, I'm going to go back to process just a second and say, since this is a bond question that needs to go to voters and we would need an amendment, I think would have been on the dais tonight, this would be deferred anyway, I assume. Is that right, Ms. Yara? I'm trying to think about process here. If Councilor Jones wanted to do that, or if there were another process, perhaps maybe we could come up with something this evening that would help.
Yes, Madam President, councilors, Councilor Davis. The council could amend this tonight and take final action on it. They could also defer it and take action on it at the next, the August 5th meeting. So there's not any limit.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I think I just want to clarify that. And Madam, or maybe I'll ask Councilor Jones since it's your question. I understand your issue, the technical or the sort of the full text that's actually in the legislation mentioned the $21 million and some other 21.7 million in bonds to plan, design, et cetera. City-owned community centers for families, youth, seniors, and other community enhancement projects. Would you be satisfied if that included language that said homeless services or housing of some sort there, or are you trying to break that issue out?
Councilor Davis, I would like to break that issue out, that item out completely. It's the way the CIP was passed, and I think it would be essential for the people to understand exactly what this is going for, because it's a huge thing for our city to help with some of the issues we have. And I think the people should be able to see what it is we're really using this for. And we voted on it. It's what should happen.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I do not have a problem deferring this. I think we still have some time to get this worked out. And I think that Councilor Jones, you bring up a very good point, because we did talk originally about breaking that question up. I think there needs to be as much transparency as possible when this thing goes to the voters. It's not a ranked choice voting question. But I would definitely support a deferral until August, and I believe we still have time to defer it like we did the other bills.
I would
to still get
second
this in
that.
the ballot.
So there's a motion and a second for the deferral of 164?
Till August 5th.
Okay, August 2nd or August?
August 5th.
August 5th. Oh, there's a motion and a second for a deferral of 164 to August 5th. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you. So now we are on 066.
Madam President, I was hoping that maybe we could go back to the beginning of the agenda. We have a couple of land
I'm
use
sorry.
appeals and some appointments, and
I think
also
also general public comment.
Yes.
See, and I thought we were actually towards the end of the agenda. So I think what we'll do is just get started with public comment then. So Don Schrader, followed by Rudolph Serrano, followed by Marcy May. So then Gary, do we have, one more time. Marcy May? Okay, come on up to the podium. Followed by Gary Williams, followed by Tad Naminsky.
Thank you for a chance to speak. My name is Marcy May. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free speech, exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Yet many of us have been called haters because, and this is by some government officials, because we disagree with their actions. We do not hate, but we fervently disagree, and that disagreement should be part of our public discourse. Mayor Keller and even some of the city council members have used public coercion, manipulation, derogatory, inflammatory language to silence or intimidate citizens of Albuquerque who disagree by the usage of adult entertainers, strippers, drag queens, or comics who promote excessive alcohol usage, exposing one's genitals for the children's programs at the library session this Saturday. Now, they did not expose their genitals, but these people are adult entertainers. We have a problem with that. Also, the use of publicly funded website to provide free advertising to adult entertainers and for a children's venue is very inappropriate and offensive. It is very obvious that the mayor and city council have an agenda to force this agenda on citizens of many people of their faith that they reject. And this isn't about saying someone cannot have a sexual preference or sexual identity. It's about what's appropriate for the children are the young children at a public library paid for by tax dollars. We demand a public apology for insensitivity to those of us who who have religious beliefs and who do not believe that adult entertainers should have presentations for young children at the public library. I want to state we do not call for any harm or disrespect for anybody in this community. I don't even expect a fellow citizen to give me the same respect, but I do expect this from our mayor and from city council people. This is the example of being called a hater. I'd say it's just unacceptable. We should be able to say, I consciously object, just like someone who's LGBT says, I consciously object to saying that I must be straight. We cannot have this, and this conversation needs to be brought
Madam Chair, we have a long agenda
respectfully.
tonight.
Thank you.
Your time is up.
Sorry, I'm just very nervous.
Gary Williams.
Good evening, President and Council. My name is Gary Williams. I'm a owner of a video production company here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've been here for 18 years, and we handle the Albuquerque Isotopes, the New Mexico Lobos, and the International Balloon Fiesta, just to name a few. We applied for the RFP to run the city public access channel back in 2018, and we submitted our proposal, and then we received a letter back in October that said that they were going to cancel that RFP, reissue it, and then they were also going to contact us. We never got contacted, and then we heard through the council meeting 2 weeks ago that the RFP had actually been reissued and actually awarded to a company that I believe it was either Councilor Davis or Councilor Harris said, or Councilor Sanchez that said they were unhappy with the decision to give it back to a company that was doing a poor performance of handling the channel 26 and 27 that are still off the air right now. So what I did is I reached out to the CAO and also to this gentleman right here with the lawyer's office just to see what happened. And basically I was told that we missed the boat because we didn't get notified, so we didn't get to resubmit. So I understand that. That's on me. What I'm asking the council to do is, because it came down to one qualified candidate, is that when the time comes for the council to approve what the mayor's office has already accepted as a proposal, that they may be refiled for reconsideration, because I believe our company has a well-qualified background in to be able to take on the city contract and handle the administration.
Thank you. Mr. Tadnaminsky, followed by M.
Would you give me overhead? Can you adjust it?
Yeah,
There's
you
some
can
pointing
start the
right here.
timer.
Enlarge it. First, what I would like to say, that's typical city council business, is violating own rules, which is supposed to be public comment number 10. Here is already almost 10 o'clock, almost meeting over. So that's where we at with this city council. Now let's go to something much lighter. What I'm reading right here, that is from Billy Graham publication. Well, why silent about sin? Why do many pastors avoid a warning against homosexuality and abortion? Well, abortion, we know who voted, how many voted last time. Now let's go here to homosexuality. Protestant, excuse me, I don't have time. But let me say something, what's happened about a month and a half ago. Here is issue about when a Mexican or immigrant illegal speaking and applauding. That is no problem. I was sick last time before Clarissa Pina was on the vacation, wherever she was. I spoke and I applauded like so. She gave me such a dirty, nasty look, an evil look. Well, that is double standard. I'm sorry. I have to make clear. Thank you.
Madam President, councilors, first, I apologize to Councilor Jones for failing to recommend that you recuse yourself from the vote on O-1954. I missed one of the districts, sorry. With regard to New Mexico in general and Albuquerque in particular becoming a major film production hub, I would like to see some of our tax dollars being leveraged to create opportunities for above-the-line talent. The director's position from NBC Universal notwithstanding, in addition to financial clawbacks being written into these agreements, I'd like to see commitments to reading or purchasing screenplays by New Mexican writers, apprenticeships or partnerships for producers. The movie industry in this state is telling other people's stories. Let's see if we can help New Mexicans tell their own stories. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Downey X, followed by Leila Celine, followed by Joel Gaffney. So I apologize. They must have left. So Katia Adams, Sue Flint, followed by Rowan Waymark, followed by Steve Cabides.
Is it good evening or is it good night? I don't know. I wanted to thank is it Councilor Winter that when you showed the poster of the senior games, thank you for showing that. It made me smile. It made me think about all the things about Albuquerque that we all love. And I guess that's why I'm up here tonight. I do want to thank you for your service. You're tired, we're tired. You're making some pretty momentous decisions. You are giving of yourself, not because it's a get-rich-quick scheme, or because you're getting a lot of status, or because, you really do want to do the best for our community. And I want you to keep thinking about what it is about Albuquerque that we need to keep in mind, because every decision you make has unintended consequences. Somebody said that. That was a very wise thing to say. So I'm challenging you to keep in the forefront of your mind the things about Albuquerque that we all love. Blue skies. For heaven's sakes, why is the film industry here? We've got blue skies. We've got clouds. That's what we want to offer people who want to come. We have interesting and diverse neighborhoods and population. We have a cultural background unequaled by very many cities. Why can't companies come to us instead of Austin or Boulder? We have so much more to offer. We have the climate. We have so much to offer. And I'm just asking you to keep those things in mind. Not do anything that could not make a decision today that's easy, that would have unintended consequences in the future and have adverse effects on our blue skies, on our diverse and cultural background. Work carefully. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam President.
Councilor
Ma'am,
Winter.
thank you very much for saying that and saying all the good things that are in Albuquerque. And I absolutely love this poster, and I'd love to give this poster to you of the deal that we just showed, because I have another one, but I'd love to give this to you.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Councilor Borrego.
I would love to hear you finish your speech, because I know that you live in my district, and I love what you're saying.
I'll write you a letter. I'll write a little love letter or something.
Sue Flint, followed by Rowan.
Nobody ever asks me to finish my speech.
Wayne
So
Martin.
I'm a little taken back on that one. You know, when I started coming in here, I came in here very angry and frustrated because I didn't understand many things. And one of the things that inspired me, of course, was Councilman Winter in May of 2012 when he told me I didn't understand government. So I changed my life. I told my kids, you're on your own. I quit working, went to school, and I decided to figure out what government was about. And in that, I found out that you have to have two parts of the government. There's the city and there's a city council, and there's the bridge in between, which is good faith. And what I realized in the city council, that many of the things that I actually researched or investigated, you didn't know because it was part of the city process. And one of the things that brought me here was developers. You know that I don't like people receiving metropolitan redevelopment bonds. I'm very stingy on RBs, but I don't like the committees, commissions, and the boards. You know, they're stacked with developers. We have one that's going to get, for his clients tonight, $47 million. So when I was listening to people say that the runoff was going to cost $1 million, I was sitting back thinking, not what you were thinking, Councilwoman Jones, about, coming out the second time, but where were you when $26 million was given away? Where were you when $50 million was given away? Priorities have to come first. I don't believe in the majority that has happened within our planning department. I don't believe that our planning directors have any business being in alliance or in membership with NAOP. I do a lot of research. And when you start developing Albuquerque and you take what is important to Albuquerque out for special interest and money, you open the door of losing what we are. And that's what I fight against. I'm dropped out of the city council race because I can't, in good faith, become a counselor when I have so much bias in some of the things that I felt. So I had to step back. Thank you.
Thank you. Rowan Weimark, followed by... Okay, thank you. Steve, and then followed by Steve Cabiedas, he's gone, and followed by Isaac East Vold. Okay, I can't tell if it was a V or an R.
I am
Welcome.
here to brighten your evening with discussion of human waste and garbage. Just to change the topic. Yeah, you're welcome. I know that I'm with the Mayor's Homeless Advisory Council with the Neighborhood Impact Group, and we are addressing it, but we're looking for immediate solutions, but even immediate solutions will be long-term. What's happening right now in our neighborhoods is there's human waste and there's garbage. And as a safety person for my neighborhood, I hear a lot from the neighbors about it. And it's not getting cleaned up in a timely manner. Now, the parks do the waste in the parks. The municipal workers do the waste in the sidewalks. And block by block, if it's within their area, do it. The thing is that it's taking a long time to get picked up. And right now, there's an incident of HEPE among our people experiencing homelessness population. And so I do think it should be picked up quicker. And in LA right now, there's typhus, for incidents of typhus for the same kind of reason. So long-term solutions, great. Public toilets, great. But something's happening now, and it's unsafe, and it's unsanitary. So that's it. I'm going home now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Eastvold, followed by Nick. I think she left. Followed by Cheryl Harris. She left. Lucille Long.
Almost midnight. Counselors, Lucille Long again. This time I'm talking about our Nob Hill Neighborhood Association. I'm one of the board members. I want to talk about an incident that just happened this weekend at Morningside Park. Curtis Bayer is our vice president and chair of our Public Safety Committee. He is a retired police officer from California, and he and his wife have donated hundreds of hours volunteering in the Nob Hill community. He has suffered burglaries, vandalism, and directly has been responsible for trying to mediate issues at Morningside Park. He gave our association his resignation over the weekend. He stated, "Today broke the camel's back. A group of transient addicts came into our yard chasing a road runner. They proceeded to our personal landscape, threw baseball-sized stones, striking our condo, and made threatening comments to shoot his home. Multiple calls were made to APD without response. Finally, APD responded after another addict had been attacked unconscious for 15 minutes. And APD still didn't help with the problem, even after receiving statements from multiple witnesses. Morningside Park is an incubator for bad behavior and drug use and homeless trash, and is disruptive to residents of the park in our south and our southeast Nob Hill neighborhood. We would like the city council to prioritize our safety in this city and in our parks, and make it safe for children and all law-abiding citizens."
Thank you. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make a quick note that, excuse me, as a part of this process, Ms. Long, I know you know because we worked with Mr. Bayer and others, and we met at their condo and had a meeting with APD. I know we've got a new fence coming in from the Water Authority to work on that project. This council, at my request, we used our set-aside dollars to put in new lighting there in Morningside Park. We brought in new police officers, and APD expedited the implementation of our bike officers there. And I know that we just passed $2 million in new park security that comes online in July, and Morningside Park, as you know, has been the priority and the demonstration park for a number of those projects. And so I appreciate the administration's attention to that and working with the neighborhood association to implement the plan that we all agreed to. And I have not heard from Mr. Bayer today about it, but he knows how to find me on our cell phone if he has those issues, and myself and Commander Yar as well. So as much as that is a hard story to hear, I know that Morningside Park has been a demonstration of the city's community police efforts, and it's one of the few neighborhoods in the city that has dedicated bicycle patrols and dedicated officers, and so we'll be sure to have them check in because I know Mr. Bayer has their numbers as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Simon Polakowski, and I think oh, there he is. And followed by Deborah Inman, followed by Melissa Malcolm.
You have to turn this on. Oh, wow, it's tiny. How do I focus it? No, it's too big. It needs to go. There you go. Keep on going. Keep on going. Keep on going. Thank you. Is my time running because of that? Anyways, 2 minutes isn't enough. Thank you for mentioning public access. The subject I was going to speak on, I would have had if I had a public access program, 58 minutes. Instead, I have 2 minutes and less. There's a lot of, you did a big break tonight for the media, NBC. This is about, this magazine here is published by Vietnam veterans. Tens of millions of Americans went to war over a lie, which was said by the government and perpetuated by the mass media. And the only way to contradict this is if people are allowed a platform with more than 2 minutes to get across, hopefully the truth that people are concerned. And, tonight you were talking about voting, that it's an obligation. Well, I have to buy whatever somebody is running for office, if I like them or not. We should have none of the above. That's a choice because you don't have to buy what what I'm selling. Why should I have to buy what you're selling? That's an equation because then we have freedom of choice. There's a lot of talk about choice now. So I would be all for what the other people said as long as there was none of the above. Because everywhere I go, people are highly upset with their government. And and that's why, what's a majority? Less than 50% of the people vote. That's not a quorum here. If you had a quorum of less than 50% of the members of this body, you couldn't do anything. You have to have a quorum. But you can have less than 50% of the populace to have a quorum for an election.
Thank you. Deborah Inman, followed by Melissa Malcolm, followed by Stephen Baca, followed by Kathy Adams, Colleen Gorman, and she's left as well, Willa Pilar, followed by Eric Jans, followed by Carlos Barros, hi.
Hi, Council President Pena, councilors. Thanks for taking our comments. I know it's late, but it means a lot to me to be able to participate. So in looking at the agenda, I also noticed that it looked like about $58 million in DRBs and LEDA, either in final action or being talked about in some way. And it seems like this is about the only discussion forum, and it's very limited. And there are things that I still don't understand that I'm trying to educate myself on. And one concern I have is the overextension of bonds. Do we become vulnerable when these bonds are issued in greater and greater amounts? What happens to our credit rating? I remember things like Eclipse Aviation that in 12 years produced one plane. What happened to our IRBs there? So these are things I'm trying to educate myself on. I'd love more comment about that at council. Aside from the economic issues, there are some environmental issues resulting from development that I don't see addressed. Environmental Planning Commission concerns itself with the built environment, but I'm not really sure who's looking at the ambiente and the environment in general. There are 7 developments between the township of Bernalillo and the Atrisco and Arenal Acequia, and they're all along the Bosque, and I don't hear anyone talking about it, not in a unified way. The county deals with its part, the city deals with its part. What's happening when these 7 developments encroach upon the river and the Bosque? The feds can't do it, like somehow there's got to be a partnership. Speaking of partnerships, public-private partnerships. We talked about economic development as a team. As a taxpayer, it seems like the only team effort I get is to be a pigeon. So infrequently do we get to vote on this or even understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Jans?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council. My name is Eric Jantz. I'm in District 7, and I'd like to share a couple of concerns that I have with Councilor Gibson's short-term rental task force. I myself am a Airbnb host, and it seems to me that this task force is a solution that is desperately seeking a problem. There's nothing in the task force report, I've read it, there's nothing on the task force webpage that indicates that there's a problem with Airbnb or any of the other rental platforms. There doesn't seem to be any issue with how it impacts housing stock. There doesn't seem to be an issue of it attracting crime. There doesn't seem to be an issue of it affecting public or low-income housing. In essence, there doesn't seem to be a problem. So it makes me wonder why this task force was convened in the first place and why we're spending public money on it at all. In any event, I also have concerns with the process that has occurred with this task force. The task force process has been distinctly opaque, in my view. There's been one public meeting, a single public meeting, in which the public participation was actually quite incredible. But the task force itself has not produced any public minutes. We don't know about any of the information that the task force is relying on. So with that, I urge the council to proceed with caution before it acts on any substantive measures affecting short-term rentals, and that at a minimum the task force be reassigned, go through a more public process that allows meaningful public input. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carlos Barros, followed by our final speaker for the evening is Ann Romero. Okay, Ann?
Thank you. Madam President, members of the council, my name is Ana Romero, and unfortunately my name got lost when the issue for the ranked choice voting was brought up, but I just wanted to still make my comments public, and I thank the chair for allowing me to say my comments. Ranked choice voting, I actually was like many of you who are on this council when the issue first came up. I was very proud to be part of the team that initially brought this to the city council in my previous position, working for the Center for Civic Policy. And I had my doubts. And just like any other issue, when I have concerns about it, I do my own research. So I actually pulled the studies that were issued through Seattle. That was the first state to initiate ranked choice voting. And what I found was some really interesting initiatives, something that is a new perspective, and I hope that when you look at this in August. Ranked choice voting actually diversified who ran for office in the city of Seattle. And for myself as a woman of color, as a young person, it definitely has the impact in allowing voters to initiate a new demographic on who they actually get to choose to vote for. The other thing that I really loved about ranked choice voting and what happened in Seattle was that it actually helped to build community. So what really happens with ranked choice voting is that it encompasses all candidates, including the incumbent, to actually get out and knock out the doors, as opposed to being an opponent who may be sending some of those negative flyers and sitting back. So what I find going to door to door, I am actually a candidate in City Council District 4. And what I'm finding is that we lack building our community in our city. And I hope that we can actually utilize, and I hope that you do research, and I'm more than welcome to share the reports that I've had, to use this as a way to actually build our community, diversify. And lastly, if we as candidates and as a city can't simplify and educate the committee on something as simple as ranked choice voting, then maybe we have to look at the way that we're actually educating the public as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we're at the top of the agenda, announcements now. Councillor Davis.
I'm sure Madam President has my announcement handy. There will be a meeting of the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission on June 27th at 5:30 in these chambers, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. There will be a Winrock Tax Increment Development District Board of Directors meeting on Wednesday, July 31st at 2 p.m. in the Council Committee Room on the 9th floor.
Thank you. There will be a Trails Public Improvement District Board of Directors meeting on Tuesday, July the 23rd at 1 p.m. in the Council Committee Room on the 9th floor. There will be a Saltillo Public Improvement District Board of Directors meeting on Wednesday, July 24th at 1 p.m. in the Council Committee Room on the 9th floor. There will be a Mesa del Sol Public Improvement District Board meeting on Wednesday, July 24th at 1:30 in the Council Committee Room. There will be a Mesa del Sol TID Board of Directors meeting on July 31st at 3 p.m. in the Council Committee Room on the 9th floor. We are now on item 12, public hearings. Mr. Melendres.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilors, item number 12 are consolidated appeals under the titles AC 19-6 and AC 19-7. These are both appeals relating to whether the Environmental Planning Commission erred in approving a site plan for single-family residential cluster developments adjacent to the city's San Antonio Oxbow major public open space. The council referred these appeals to its land use hearing officer, who consolidated them for review and recommends that the appeals be denied, that the EPC be affirmed, and that the site plan be approved. Under the IDO, a site plan is required here because the site is greater than 5 acres in size and also adjacent to city's major public open space. The council has dealt with this type of site plan review recently with the Singing Arrow Community Center, which was adjacent to the Tijeras Arroyo. The site is zoned for single-family residential. It can accommodate lots of approximately 11,000 square feet. But in the alternative, the IDO offers an opportunity to do clustering of lots, which permits more compact lots across the site in exchange for the preservation of open space. And that's the proposal that was before the EPC and up for your review this evening. This particular development would consist of 76 combined lots across 23 acres. It's divided out into 2 clusters, one of 40 lots, the other of 36. The EPC determined that the site plan satisfied the review criteria of the IDO and made several findings about the site's consistency with the comp plan and the IDO requirements for adjacency to major public open space. However, the appellants argue that the site plan is actually contrary to several requirements of the IDO, including the way that clustering is calculated, including the procedure for evaluating the type of projects that can go adjacent to sensitive lands, in evaluating negative impacts at the site, and in evaluating certain technical standards for street layouts. Appellants also argue that there was a couple of procedural errors related to open meetings requirements and due process. The land use hearing officer held a hearing on this and reviewed all of those assertions relative to this appeal and recommends that the EPC's decision be affirmed and that the site plan ultimately be approved because it does comply with the IDO and there do not appear to have been procedural issues that would result in a reversal. With respect to the evaluation of the individual issues, the LUHO determined that the IDO actually permits multiple clusters to be depicted on a single site plan, and that is not contrary to the zoning code, the integrated development ordinance to do that. In this case, the design, because of the way it's laid out, would allow a large portion of on-site open space to be preserved as a buffer adjacent to the San Antonio Oxbow, and it places the lowest residential densities in the areas approaching that major public open space, and those are the findings of the land use hearing officer. In addition, the LUHO determined that the record demonstrates that considerations about sensitive lands were made throughout this process, and they were addressed through buffering, and that protecting environmental elements became increasingly important through this process, where the EPC deferred the site plan several times for improvements to be made. In addition, the negative impacts were evaluated appropriately here and were mitigated appropriately with respect to the open space buffer and on-site draining and grading and drainage mitigation requirements that were imposed by the EPC. In addition, with respect to street connectivity, the EPC was correct in delegating that to the DRB in order for it to ensure that the ultimate street dimensions and block lengths meet the requirements of the DPM, which is the appropriate place for those considerations. In addition, the land use hearing officer determined that the EPC was correct in evaluating areas of consistency under the comprehensive plan. This particular site plan depicts single-family residential with the more compact lots next to existing relatively compact lots in the Andalusia subdivision, with a transition into lower density lots and open space as you approach the Oxbow area, thus appearing consistent with the surrounding areas. The LUHO also evaluated open meetings requirements and determined that the EPC did not err by taking intermittent rest breaks during its extended deliberation, that the Open Meetings Act does not apply to planning staff in its evaluation, and that there were no due process errors relative to cross-examination or to the amount of time allotted to neighborhood representatives. One of the issues that was raised is that under the EPC rules, neighborhood representatives are to be allocated 5 minutes. However, for purposes of efficiency, it appears that the chair of the EPC limited the time of all speakers to 2 minutes each. There were 50 people signed up that day, and under the LUHO's evaluation, that appeared consistent with making changes to the process to promote efficiency of that hearing and did not violate anybody's due process. Finally, participants were allowed to submit cross-examination questions to the chair for the chair to distribute those questions, and that's consistent with the EPC's process and does not present a due process issue. For all those reasons, and based on the extended evaluation of the land use hearing officer, who wrote, I think, a record 35-page recommendation on this particular appeal, the land use hearing officer is recommending that the EPC be affirmed, that the site plan be approved, and that the appeal be denied. If you have questions about this appeal, I'll do my best to respond to those from the record alone. In the event that you can't get the information that you need from this discussion and from the record before you, you may choose to reject the hearing officer's recommendation in favor of holding a hearing at a later time.
Counselor Benton, followed by Counselor Sanchez.
So, Mr. Melendres, a couple of things. With regard to the interpretation of the LUHO about multiple cluster developments basically on the same piece of property, you're convinced that that analysis by the LUHO is accurate?
Madam President, Councilor Benton, so this was a very specific issue of debate and contention in this particular appeal, and the LUHO made an evaluation of the integrated development ordinance, and he also reviewed the testimony of the city's zoning hearing officer about how that is supposed to play out under the IDO. And essentially, what the IDO says is that you can do clustering. The way that you figure out the number of units you can have is you divide the acreage by the minimum lot size, get that number, except that if it exceeds 50, you're limited to 50 per cluster. And so the IDO does not put a limit or on proximity to the number of clusters that can happen. And the way I think that the ZEO explained that, I think, relatively effectively to the EPC, and I'll quote ZEO Martinez, is that, for example, if you take hypothetically two adjacent properties owned by different people, and each one of those different people wanted to do a cluster development under the IDO, they would be permitted to do that. And there's no distinction under the IDO that would say because your neighbor has a cluster, you can't also have a cluster. And what's before you today is essentially a single property owner that is doing 2 clusters as opposed to 2 different property owners. And so the distinction, I think in those terms, is not potentially as relevant because the IDO does have requirements for individual clusters within the IDO. However, so long as each cluster is meeting the relative requirements of the IDO, that appears consistent with the IDO.
So the IDO doesn't say no development can exceed 50 dwellings?
So correct, Madam President, Councilor Benton, what the IDO says is that, I'll quote it for you. The number of dwelling units is determined by dividing the site area by the minimum lot size allowed in the zone, rounded down to the nearest whole number, but shall not exceed 50. And so that's what you're looking at for the cluster. In this particular instance, the site plan depicts what the developers have identified as 40 lots that have sort of characteristics in common, and then another 36 that have characteristics in common. Now, one important thing that may be helpful for this discussion is that the cluster development requirements say that your cluster in general has to meet the setbacks of the zone. And when the developers first came in with this, they wanted to call it 2 different clusters, but they only wanted to meet the setbacks once. And so the EPC did not permit that. And they doubled down on their interpretation of the IDO, saying, look, we think you can depict 2 clusters on the same site plan. However, each of those individual clusters has to meet the setbacks relative for the zoning district. And so that the EPC's thought process and conditions were internally consistent, and the LUHO determined that was an appropriate interpretation of the IDO in that sense.
Thank you.
Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I've looked and read this case, and I'm very concerned regarding Table 4-2-1 in the IDO. And I'm not certain that it's clear because basically it states in that the table allows a cluster development singular, not multiple cluster developments. And that is a concern for me because I don't see anywhere that it allows multiple clusters when in the IDO that was just adopted in May, it talks about singular and not multiple cluster developments. Can you please explain that?
Madam President, Councilor Sanchez, that was an issue that was evaluated at length in this appeal. And the use table that you're referring to describes the permissive uses in the relative zoning districts. And what the appellants are arguing and reading into that use table is that when a use is listed in its singular tense, that it means you can only have one such use. The land use hearing officer evaluated that and came to the conclusion that that was not the correct interpretation. And basically, if you look at that use table, it could say a use, for example, of office. And if you have, I mean, if we look around town, if we look in downtown Albuquerque, there are office buildings on single parcels that have multiple offices within them. The Hyatt across the street, you know, probably the biggest office building in downtown Albuquerque, has multiple offices. So if we were to take that interpretation of the zoning code, we would be determining that a large office building on a single parcel could only have one office within it. And so the IDO, that LUHO determined that the IDO is not set up to be read that way, and he did evaluate the case law that was submitted by the applicants, the Hinkle High Ridge case, which was decided by this council and ultimately went up to district court, and it talked about how you interpret statutes, and including ordinances of the city. And what that case stands for, is evaluated by the LUHO, is that you cannot read in requirements that are not there. And so by reading in that a singular term means that you can only have one such use, when that interpretation would read something into the IDO that's not there and would otherwise be inconsistent with the way the IDO is structured, was not appropriate.
And I have concerns by the statement that the IDO was not set up to be read that way. That means there's problems within the IDO still, that people are interpreting the law differently. And the LUHO hearing officer made that determination. But basically, looking at what is in the books and in the law, there's still some ambiguity and uncertainty of what is the correct interpretation. I think he made that interpretation on his own, and I don't read that in here based on what I've looked at.
Councillor Borrego.
you. My question is with regard to the EPC's review process. According to this appeal, that it was flawed procedurally. What does that mean exactly?
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, in this particular appeal, the appellants are raising basically 3 issues about the EPC's process. First, they're saying that the EPC violated the Open Meetings Act by taking breaks during their deliberation. So during the process that they were reviewing, the chair called for, minutes-long breaks for whatever reasons, bathroom breaks, snack breaks. The appellants are suggesting that during those breaks, the EPC was discussing the proposal outside of the open meeting. As the LUHO identified, there's no specific evidence to suggest that that was the case, and it appeared reasonable based on the extended deliberation of the EPC that they would be permitted to take breaks. The second is that the appellants are arguing that the EPC violated due process by not giving neighborhood representatives a full 5 minutes to present. The EPC rules do say that neighborhood representatives are supposed to get 5 minutes. However, not unlike the council rules, deviations can be made when appropriate, so long as they meet the minimum requirements of due process. And in this particular instance, it appears that being faced with 50 speakers on this proposal, that the chair made the decision to limit the time even further than was otherwise prescribed in the rules. But everybody did have an opportunity to be heard. The LUHO determined that that was the most important aspect of it. And finally, with respect to cross-examination, as part of a quasi-judicial hearing, participants and parties do have the opportunity to cross-examine other speakers who have entered evidence into the record. And the EPC has a practice of doing that by written question. So if you're a person sitting out in the audience and you take issue with something somebody is saying, instead of at that point, standing up and asking that person's questions for the purpose of efficiency, it appears that the EPC has put a rule in place that you would write down your question. All those get passed up to the chair, and then the chair reads through the questions and calls upon the appropriate person to respond. That's a common practice of the EPC. Those were the 3 issues that were raised by the appellants, being pointed to as potential procedural flaws. However, the LUHO found that those, in fact, did not present procedural defects in the EPC's process.
Thank you.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I was not at that meeting, but I did read through the minutes, and this was a 6-hour hearing. And during a 6-hour hearing, I believe that the board is entitled to a break. I don't believe any procedures were violated. The chairman, I made the decision, I guess, to reduce the public speaking to 2 minutes. There were 50 individuals that were signed up to speak. So as far as the issue of the Open Meetings Act, I don't believe that the EPC violated any of those rules and regulations.
Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. So I find this personally rather difficult because I think I understand the appellants on this case. It's hard to see development go into a really special area there. It changes the ambiance and the visual effect. However, we still live in a free country, and people have the right to purchase land and do with it what they want to do with, as how they want to do with it. But within reasons, within our zoning laws and there, again, there's, the city of Albuquerque has made provisions to appeal decisions that are made according to, some pretty carefully considered rules around that. And the appellants have, decided to do that and have pursued it. but here's the thing, I can't make a decision based on emotion, you know. We have to follow the laws, and I don't think that, when I was reading through this, it sounds like, everyone has done their part, and pretty effectively answered all of the questions and objections made by the appellants. Another thing that really came to my mind while I was reading through this is that the Poole family, who I understand were longtime owners of this property, never,
because of their adjacent
made provisions for it to go to
I mean, if they would've
open space or, to be protected anyway, in any way. And obviously, they had the option to do that. So it wasn't in their mindset at the time. So that kind of leaves us to, if you want to protect something, you have to buy it or petition open space to try to buy that. We have a long list. The open space group has a long list of properties to be considered for purchase, and this never has appeared on that. So I'm going to go ahead and move to accept the Lujo decision and findings.
There's a motion and a second to accept the Lujo's findings of AC 19, recommendations and findings. All those in favor, Councilor Sanchez?
Thank you, Madam President. I cannot support that. I felt there is a lot of uncertainty regarding this case, and I know it's not based on emotions. There's facts, again, based on the IDO. What I am reading is totally different than what is being stated here this evening, is that basically it's a singular use and not for a cluster development, not multiple uses. I mean, they could have come in for two separate applications. It may have been different. But again, I think that there is a critical issue here, and that's, I know they've made additional space and room for open space by the cluster development. I think that is a good thing. But I just feel there is so much uncertainty here, and reading the IDO, it doesn't state that this can be done. And I would like to see that we reject the Lujo's recommendation and have a full hearing before this council.
Well, no, there's actually a motion on the, no. There's a motion on the floor, yeah.
Madam President, could the maker of the motion just clarify that, or maybe I can just clarify that you're going to need two motions since they're two separate appeals that were consolidated. So we'll take your original motion as for AC 19.6, and then we'll need another dispositive motion for 19.7.
Okay, then my motion to accept the recommendations and the findings of Lujo reply for the first one for 6.
AC 19.6. So there's a motion on and a second on the floor. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand. Yes. All those opposed, no, and raise your hand. So motion. Did you get that? Motion fails. Next is
We're still on the bill.
Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we reject the Lujo's recommendation and set up a full hearing at the next meeting before this council.
There's a motion and a second to set up a hearing at the next council meeting. All those in favor?
Madam President, so there's a couple things you can do. You could do nothing, which would result in a full hearing, or you can make this motion to reject the Lujo recommendation, and that will automatically result in a full hearing at our first meeting in August.
So there's a motion to...
Madam President, Councilor Sanchez made a motion to reject the Lujo recommendation, which would result in a full hearing in August.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Raise your hand. So that passes. So then we move on to AC, nope, no. There's a, Counselor Sanchez, the AC 19-7. Do you want to make a motion on that? We heard them together, right? So we don't have to hear, okay.
Madam President, all we need is a motion for 7. It should be the same motion.
So moved.
So there's a motion and a second for a, to reject, correct? The recommendations and findings, all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no? No. There was 3 noes that time. Was there 3 noes? Say no, raise your hand. So 3 noes. Okay, so we will move on to approvals. Item A, under approvals, is OC 29. Staff recommends to appoint Ms. Tara Armijo Pruitt to the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board. I move approval. There's a motion and a second for approval. Is there anyone signed up to speak? No. So we'll go to vote. All those in favor of OC 29, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next, we are on OC 30, staff recommendation to appoint Eric Olivas to the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board. There's a motion and a second for OC 30. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item is 14, final actions. Counselor, we did A, we completed B, C, and now we are back on, are we ready to untable item 054? I mean, P3?
Do we have the amendment? Looks like we do.
No? We can move on to R164. We did that, Counselor Sanchez? Okay. 066. Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Madam President. This is amending Chapter 8, Article 2, Part 7 of the Traffic Code relating to the pedestrian safety in medians and certain roadside areas and pedestrian vehicle interactions, and amending associated definitions within the Traffic Code, Chapter 8, Article 2, Part 1. This is to clarify some of the issues in the pedestrian safety ordinance. It's just to clarify for enforcement. I move a do pass.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for a do pass of 066.
And then, Madam President, I'd like to move a floor substitute for 066. It's in your iPads.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for floor sub for 066. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you. And then I would like to move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of allowing 066 to be adopted, the same adopted this evening as substituted.
So there's is there a second for that? Second. There's a motion and a second to adopt 066 this evening. All those in favor say yes and raise your hand.
Yes. Yes.
All those opposed, no, and raise your hand. No. Okay, so is there anyone signed up to speak? No. Any discussion, councilors, questions? Davis, Councilor Davis?
Very briefly, Madam President, just to the sponsor, I just want to clarify these amendments for those watching or following along, because it's been important. These amendments clarify areas where it is permissible for persons to solicit in a way, and just clarify some of the definitions in terms of how we defined our medians and allowable interactions between persons and vehicles. Is that correct?
That is correct, mostly just to define the areas that is applicable.
Thank you.
Madam President, Councilor.
Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Melendez, I seen you.
Thank you. So yeah, just to clarify, it doesn't, I think the term solicit was referenced, and it's related to where people are permitted to stand within medians and roadside areas, regardless of their purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. And Madam President, just to clarify, so this clarifies the areas where it is permissible for persons to conduct that activity. Is that right?
to be present within
present.
areas that weren't otherwise designated for pedestrian use.
Thank you.
God bless you, Counselor Benton and Counselor Borrego.
Counselor Jones, the question that I had was with regard to the lawsuit that we were in with regard to the ACLU and how this affects that.
Thank you, ma'am.
or
I'll
impacts-
ask Mr. Melendres to respond to that.
Thank you, Madam President, councilors. So after the pedestrian safety ordinance was approved by this council in approximately 2017, the city did have a lawsuit related to that ordinance. As a result of that, enforcement of the ordinance is presently under stay. However, these amendments would be added to the ordinance in the anticipation that the ordinance will be implemented at some point in the future, and to clarify enforcement and what conduct is specifically prohibited under the ordinance.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Chris?
You want me to start from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. So in 2017, this council passed the pedestrian safety ordinance. Almost immediately after it was adopted, the ACLU filed suit against the city. As a result of that suit, the city agreed to stay enforcement of this ordinance, so it's not presently being enforced pending the outcome of that lawsuit. These amendments are in anticipation of enforcement of the ordinance at the time that the lawsuit is settled and the stay is lifted.
So this will not go into effect until that time that the lawsuit has been
Correct, Madam President, Councilor Borrego. They will be effective on the books. However, this council's action tonight will not impact the stay of enforcement.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? Administration? Did you have anything? Oh,
Madam President, that's correct. Currently, this matter is scheduled to be heard before the court in August. So we anticipate if these amendments are enacted, that trial date will be pushed back. But ultimately, the ordinance that will be heard by the court will be the version enacted if the amendments are enacted today. Will be these ordinance, so we won't have to try the case twice.
So one more question, Madam Chair.
Counselor Borrego.
So, and I know it's getting really late, but, so APD is able to enforce this?
Madam
No.
President, Madam Vice President, no. Nor.
I mean, after that time is what I'm saying. Once that time occurs, the lawsuit is done, then APD is able to enforce this.
Madam President, Madam Vice President, depending on the outcome of that suit, that would be correct. If the court rules that the ordinance is constitutional, then at that point in time, the department will be able to enforce.
Any other discussion?
Urge your support.
Seeing none, Counselor Jones to close. So there's a motion and a second for approval of O66 as substituted. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no? No. So that motion passes. We are now on, Counselor Harris? We already did that.
Yeah, we're ready to move this off the table.
We're ready? Okay, so we are going to go back to Counselor Harris in Proposition 3.
I'll move P19, take it off the table.
Second?
The motion and a second to take, to remove it, take it off the table. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. No, we,
Yes, Madam President, and Councilor Harris, I'm a little bit confused. This looks exactly like the amendment that you just passed. If the
Yes.
clerk or Mr. Padilla can tell us what the difference is. Otherwise, you can just
I think that
leave
is
it
the
as
same
is.
amendment, but it's typed up. It's going to be going in our charter, so we wanted to make sure that it's actually typed up. I think there might be one word or something that's different. Is there?
Yes, Madam President, Councilor. I think I just added a reference to, after methodology, I put ranked choice methodology instead of just methodology. But
Okay.
this is essentially what you had before.
I'll make a motion to substitute the sort of the oral amendment 1 with this amendment 1 that's typed up. Can I do that? Okay, all right. So in other
Wait a
words,
second,
we
wait a
already
second.
amended it.
Can we do that?
Madam President, Councilor Harris, yes, you can do that. It's essentially the same amendment as I'm reading it. Maybe there's an extra word in it. You can rescind the prior amendment if you want it to be cleaner,
Okay.
but it does the same thing, so.
I make a motion to rescind the prior amendment and replace it with this one.
There's a motion and a second to rescind the prior amendment. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Counselor Betton.
Yeah, as I see it, it's, the big change is the substitution of the word may in the last two or three sentences instead of shall. A future council may adopt the recommendation upon approval, and in the last sentence, the council may modify by ordinance the ranked choice methodology up to 6. I think that the key would be the first one. I think prior to that, it read shall.
Yep, had been shall, and that's so that we're not bound by whatever the clerk does. Of course, we're governed by it. So, do I need to
One
make-
second. Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to suspend the rules and extend the meeting till 11 p.m.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Counselor Harris.
Thank you. Have we both rescinded and replaced this, or want me to replace it?
We need a motion to approve Amendment 2
I
as
make a
written.
motion to approve Amendment 2.
There's a motion and a second for Amendment 2. Any questions? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're back on P3.
I move a deferral so we can have a second hearing on the first meeting in August.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for a deferral until August the 5th. I keep hearing you say second, the 5th. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. So now,
Madam President?
oh, Counselor Sanchez.
Madam
sorry.
Clerk, you can leave now. I know you had a commitment with your family.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure they're still waiting for me. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, man. Okay, so now we are on R102, amending the boundary of the West Central Metropolitan Redevelopment Area to designate an additional area for inclusion within the MRA. I move a due pass.
Second.
There's a motion, a second for a due pass. Anyone signed up to speak? Any of the counselors have any questions? Seeing, hearing none. Counselor Sanchez.
Madam President, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for bringing this forward. I brought this forward several years ago, and the bill failed. I just think it's important with all the momentum that's going on now on West Central, that we have the opportunity to extend the MRA and to allow even more businesses to come to the area. But I think we've made some tremendous progress with Nuevo Atrisco coming in, and I just think by moving that forward that we can, expedite more businesses moving in. This is, I think, good news for the West Central area and the citizens on the west side.
Absolutely. Thank you, Counselor Sanchez. So with that, there's a motion and a second for approval of R102. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next, we have R146. Counselor Harris.
Thank you. This is amending I'll go ahead and move a due pass.
Second.
And this is, this is R19-146. This is amending the boundary of the East Gateway Metropolitan Redevelopment Area to designate an additional area for inclusion within the MRA, making certain findings, et cetera. And I'm also going to have an amendment. Since it's getting late, Ms. Morris, could you just, in a Reader's Digest version, talk about why this is necessary and what's happening?
Madam President, councillors, yes. The bill before you this evening amends the boundary of the East Gateway MR plan. It adds in the southwest corner of Wantabo and Copper. A portion of this site is included in the MR boundaries, and the bill before you tonight would extend the boundaries to include the entire site. It includes a Olive Garden restaurant and a Chinese buffet restaurant. However, the rest of the strip mall is vacant and blighted, and so this would allow the property owners to make use of the MR tools to help redevelop and revitalize the site. Also before you this evening is an amendment that Councillor Harris just mentioned, and Councillor, would you like me to summarize that as well, or?
Sure, ahead, go ahead.
Okay. So the amendment before you this evening would also add in the Singing Arrow Park and the Rancho de Canue archaeological site. This would put this within the MR boundaries. The Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan includes on page 7 a recommendation that enhancements and improvements are made to public parks and facilities within the MR boundaries. The language includes a direct reference to the Singing Arrow Park and the archaeological site. However, they're not actually included within the boundaries of the plan, and so this amendment would allow those areas to be incorporated into the plan boundaries and therefore MR money to be used to further this recommendation that's in the adopted plan.
With that, I'll move amendment number 1.
Second.
There's a motion, a second for amendment number 1. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're back on the bill.
Urge your support.
So there's a motion, a second. Any discussion? Councillor Borrego?
I just wanted to say that in 2008, we recommended these changes to the West Central Plan and the East Gateway Plan, and if you hang around long enough, it's 10 years later, and they actually get done. So.
Thank you. So Councillor Harris, so there's a motion and a second for approval of R-146 as amended. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councillor Winter.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. This is R-157. This is providing interim regulations on development adjacent to low-density residential land use until the Phase 2 zoning conversion process is completed. And I'm going to have Petra talk about this to be as concise as possible on this, because there's really some understanding that needs to be done. The IDO, as you know, we've got a few hiccups, and I think this is one of those hiccups. Councillor Jones is carrying 2 amendments, and they really need to be talked about because they're kind of adverse to each other. But she's going to carry one that I really support because I think it really cleans up the bill, and then she's going to carry another and that basically gets rid of the first amendment. So she was gracious enough that we could put them both on the table and discuss those, but I'd really like Petra to first just go over why this bill is here and what's happened and how it got here.
Madam President, councilors, so as general background, the IDO offers the neighborhood edge provision as a way to protect low-density residential development from a more intense adjacent development. However, at present, under the IDO, this only applies if you have low-density residential zoning. There are, however, some properties around town that have low-density residential land use rather than zoning. Some of these low-density residential land uses wish to have this protection, and they have applied through the Phase 2 zoning conversion process to align their land use and zoning. However, these protections won't apply until the conversion process is completed. The first batch of these was heard at the EPC in January 2010. January 10th of 2019, sorry, not that long. Planning transmitted the packets to the City Council. However, we didn't receive that until May 29th. We're now at the LUPs with the batch 1 conversions. Those will go to the full council in August. So there are some folks out there who are, to a certain degree, in limbo. And so this bill seeks to address that by extending the neighborhood edge provisions based on land use rather than zoning, while the Phase 2 conversion process is being completed. This bill would, if passed, would limit heights to 30 feet. And in addition, it would change the rules of the IDO very slightly in this bill. The way that the IDO neighborhood edge provision is written, parking is not allowed within 50 feet of the low-density residential use. This has the inadvertent effect of pushing the buildings from the front of the property, up by the road, to the back, near the low-density residential use. And so this bill also includes some language that would reduce that parking area from 50 feet to 15, so that parking can still be located at the back of the property and the larger, taller buildings not at the back, very close to the low-density residential use. As written, this bill would apply citywide to all properties that are adjacent to a low-density residential use. We have, as Councilor Winter mentioned, 2 amendments to this that would limit the scope of the bill. And when you guys are ready, I can talk about those.
Madam President and Councilor Jones, if it's okay, could she start with amendment number 1 and explain it and what it does to the bill, and then amendment number 2? Madam President, thank you.
Council President, Madam President, councilors. So the first amendment is one that would, if you imagine it's a series of concentric circles, you've got citywide as the bill. The first amendment would limit this to those that have applied for the Phase 2 conversion process. So this would only be applicable, so your circle is getting smaller, to low density, to development adjacent to low-density residential uses that have applied for the Phase 2 conversion process. So this would limit the scope of who is impacted by the bill.
And Madam President, and are there a couple neighborhoods this will affect? Can you kind of give the brief of what this might affect?
So this, Madam President, councilors, this would still apply citywide, but this would mean that any neighbors that have a request that's either in the batch 1 conversions or the batch 2 conversions, that this would apply for them, and this is everywhere in the city. However, it would not pull in individuals who have a low-density residential use but have no intention of seeking the protections for the adjacent property, who maybe want to develop out their property later with a more intense use commensurate with the zoning that they have.
Madam President, thank you. And then amendment number 2.
Madam President, councilors, and so the second amendment would make that circle even smaller, and this would add some language to the bill. As written, it says final approval. So this means that if you have a site plan, for example, in front of the building permit review folks right now, if once this goes into effect, you would have to change your site plan to meet the regulations in here. The amendment would say if you have a site plan admin, a site plan DRB, or a site plan EPC that has been accepted by the planning department as complete and ready for review, you are exempted from these rules. And so the idea with that is that if you have submitted some applications to the city and you're going through the review process, the rules wouldn't change on you midstream.
Thank you, Madam President. So could you compare the two? So what amendment number 2 does for the amendment number 1, even those neighborhoods that have applied for neighborhood protection, edge protection, amendment 2 would wipe that out so that they would not get that protection.
Madam President, councilors, yes, if there was a situation where somebody had a low-density residential land use and they had requested the Phase 2 conversions and an adjacent property had an application that was in the process, the neighborhood edge, if the second amendment goes through, the neighborhood edge provisions would not apply to them. So those neighbors would not get that protection.
If I may try to explain that, make it a little bit careful. This is to protect. So if neighborhoods are already in and have applied for the protection, then the developer, only if their plans have been approved as complete, basically, may the developer go ahead and build.
Excuse me. Madam President, councilors, This would, the second amendment would not be those that are completely approved, but those that have been submitted for review. So, excuse me.
But considered completed.
Yeah, considered complete applications, yes.
Okay.
Madam President, this is where the confusion lies, and maybe
Exactly.
Mr. Melendres needs to clarify that, because we're talking about completed or submitted. So there's a big difference, Mr. Melendres, and I think that's, so if a neighborhood has submitted the provisions, and then a developer has gone ahead and submitted, but it hasn't been gone through the process and approved, what happens?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, so kind of just to set up the picture, there are a couple of spots in the development process where the city can place a limit. And it can place a limit at the time of application, or it can place a limit at the time of approval. And what the bill as drafted and submitted before you says is that that limit is placed at the time of approval. So in other words, if neighborhoods or property owners in the city have submitted their Phase 2 Batch 1 conversion request, and during the pendency of that request, an application is pending, these changes that are being proposed under the resolution would still apply to those pending applications because of the fact that the Batch 1 has been submitted. So to kind of wrap that up, the resolution before you would place the fulcrum of its effect at the time of approval as opposed to the time of application. So even if you've applied, you would still be subject to these so long as you have not yet got your final approval.
So, Mr. Melendres, what happens with the second amendment? Does that change that?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, yes, it does. It changes that application point from the time of approval, and it reverses it back to the time of application. And it says that if you have already submitted and you're somewhere in the process, then you're going to be exempt from the neighborhood edge policy in this resolution.
Madam Chair, I'm trying to clarify this.
Okay.
So let's take a scenario. So if a neighborhood has already applied for the neighborhood neighborhood protection, edge protection provisions, and it hasn't gone through the process, it was held up somewhere in the process. So during that time, then a developer went in and submitted a permit or something that has not gone through the but it has been submitted. How does that affect each amendment?
So under the scenario that you've laid out, with Amendment 1, with no amendment, I guess I should say, as written, the fact that somebody has submitted during that twilight period would indicate that they have to amend their plans to meet the neighborhood edge requirements in the event that they're adjacent to a Batch 1 applicant. Under the amendment, it means that they would not have to make those changes. They would be able to rely on the rules that were in place the day that they applied for their project.
But that's not Amendment Number 1. Does Amendment Number 1 say the same thing?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, if I was unclear, I was referring to Amendment Number 2.
Okay.
So,
Can I okay. Counselor Harris.
Sure. And just to be clear, has any other counselor brought anything like this to your attention?
Madam President, Councilor Harris, there have been instances in the past where sort of an interim regulation has been imposed by the council, yes.
Okay, but in terms of this neighborhood edge thing, I mean, what I'm concerned about is we're talking about a hypothetical situation, which is really directed at a certain situation in a certain neighborhood, and it's not hypothetical at all. And could we talk about what this is really going on here?
Madam President, Councilor Harris, your prerogative to discuss.
I mean, you're talking about, this is the, talking about Alameda and, what is it? What's the apartment complex? Barstow, an apartment complex? So we're making, talking about the citywide application because we're essentially targeting an apartment complex which is unconstitutional. I'm like very uncomfortable with this, Councilor Winter. I mean, this is not a citywide thing.
yeah, Madam President, it is a citywide thing. There happens to be at least one neighborhood in the citywide that this is affecting. And so, so basically, and I'll go through the process of what happened. So basically, the community members who wanted the neighborhood edge provisions were advised in good faith, part of the IDO, correct? They were part of the IDO that said they could do that. They submitted it 3 months ago, and in perfect time. So they followed what the IDO did in good faith. And these were provisions via the Phase 2 conversion process. So in good faith, they checked, they did what they were told. They applied approximately 120 in batch 1, and there was over about 1,000 in batch 2. However, the first batch, it was received in a timely manner and was held up somewhere for 3 months that didn't get to us in time. So basically, what we're doing is we're following a neighborhood that did the process according to the IDO, which everybody here, you all voted on, worked with the community to get this done, and now they're being punished because it was held someplace up and a developer did make a process or made an application. And so I understand what you're saying, Counselor, but it affects the whole city and it's going to affect other people too.
Councillor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is in regards to the conversion process. We are now looking at Phase 2. Well, once these conversions are completed, will that take care of a lot of these problems that Councillor Winter is talking about?
Madam President, Councillor Sanchez, so it's important to remember that there's an apartment complex that's been referenced. That's an example of the issue. There are 120 applications in batch 1 of the Phase 2 conversion, and at this point, approximately 1,000 in the Phase 2. And this is a citywide conversion process. And so to the extent that this resolution passes, the neighborhood edge protection that would be included in this resolution would be extended to all of those properties, the 120 in batch 1 and the 1,000 in batch 2, presuming that they get a zoning that aligns with an existing residential land use. And so what the resolution says is that during that interim period, during the pendency of this resolution, that those neighborhood edge protections would extend to those folks that are in that Phase 2 conversion who at this point appear likely that the conversion will ultimately happen to get their residential land use consistent with their zoning. The resolution also indicates that at the time that the city takes up the annual update of the IDO, that it needs to consider this issue and how it will ultimately in the long term treat it.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Borrego, before we do that, I'd actually like to hear from Director Campbell.
Madam President, councilors, one of the beauties of the IDO is that it does have certainty and it has application citywide. And one of the difficulties with this bill is that it's meant to address perhaps a single issue but has implications citywide. And our concern from the planning department standpoint is that the implications will be much wider by making this change than simply addressing a single issue. The way we address single issues in the IDO is these zone conversions that are individual issues or the annual updates. We don't take a citywide issue and apply it generally without, when we have these other more precise tools available to us. And so I think from the planning department's perspective, we would say, let's act precisely on issues that need precision by dealing with specific issues through the zone conversion process and not try to apply blanket-wide, citywide, a bill that may be way too broad for our purposes.
Thank you. Councilor Borrego.
One of the biggest problems that I have with this process, and I mean with this amendment, is that there is a development process and it's predictable. And it seems like we are picking a point in that development process where we're changing the rules of the game. And I think that, to me, that seems, it just doesn't seem like it should happen, because when a developer comes in, they submit an application and there's a process. And now we're saying at this point in the process, we are going to change the rule. And I think that that doesn't give the developers the certainty that they need to understand that, you know, there's point A to point Z or whatever, but you go through the process. And so that's one of the biggest problems that I have. The second thing that I have that I'm concerned with is that we have unintended consequences by affecting other areas when we already have a process for the amendments to the IDO. So, you know, I understand, you know, you've got some issues, Councilor Winter, but it seems to me like it's going to have unintended consequences in other parts of the city.
Madam President.
Councilor Jones, followed by Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Campbell, I like what you're saying. Obviously, do we have a means of doing that, that we could protect? Here's the issue with this one particular piece of property that we're really dealing with here.
Right.
The developer has gone through the process. They're ready. Because this whole application was tied up for 90 days before it came back to the council so we could move on it, they proceeded thinking that they had the right. The neighborhood wants to fight back. I agree, we should not do a citywide application on this. Is there something we can do for the existing property that we're really talking about without breaking any major rules, laws?
Madam President, and Councilor Jones, if I can also address Councilor Borrego's statement. Again, what we have with the IDO is some certainty. We know what the rules are. We, the city, have seen what happens when we change the rules and after the process has begun, after applications have gone in. And the city has, unfortunately, paid a great deal of money in the past. And I will cite the Albuquerque Commons Partnership case as one in which clearly what happened was we had the rules, application went in, we changed the rules and had for the intention of having a different impact on a particular site. We paid $14 million in risk management on that
Madam
case.
President, I take exception going down this route, and I have a question I want to ask here. We have protection for developers. That's what the IDO is, but it also sets up protections for the neighborhoods too, and you're leaving that out. And you don't understand, Mr. Councilor Borrego, because there are protections for everybody. That's why we did the IDO.
Excuse me.
Madam President,
Director Campbell.
I'd like to finish my statement, and that is that in addressing what Councilor Borrego said, yes, in fact, it does provide certainty, but not just for developers, but for neighborhood associations. Everybody knows what these rules are. It has that ability of protecting and knowing what is certain in the process. So people know going into it what the process will be. Okay. By making a change that's citywide like this, we will have the kind of unintended consequences that we don't know where they will go.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson.
So, Director, I understand, I agree with you, I get your logic, but what we've done is we have failed those neighbors in that neighborhood. We devised this plan of action with the IDO, and we failed them. We did not do what we told them that we would do. So what's your recommendation?
Madam
Is there
President,
a cure for that?
Councilor Gibson, one of the things Mr. Melender said that was very important is what this does is it deals with the uses and not the zoning. What happened in this particular situation was we had zoning that allowed up to the density of commercial or residential townhouse, RT, and therefore the conversion under the IDO was to mixed use medium or MXL or MXM in these cases. The difficulty is when you're allowed to build townhouses, you're allowed to build density up to townhouses, and the developer chooses, or the homeowners choose to build single-family residential, and they say, wait, you can't convert us to townhouse when in fact we've built our homes, we've built individual homes. So there's a disconnect between that which is zoned and that which the actual development happened to be. And that was the situation that we're dealing with in the circumstance here. That's unfortunate, but that gets corrected as part of the zoning conversion process and not an overall blanket change to the IDO.
Madam President.
One second, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to suspend the rules and extend the meeting till 11:15.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Madam President. I think, Mr. Campbell, that's what we're doing. I'd like Mr. Melendres to come clarify some things that have been said, if he would.
Councilor Harris, did you want to add anything before Director Campbell
Well,
leaves the podium?
for Director Campbell, one thing is that this is kind of unique, and I think one of the unique things is that I understand that the developer actually knew darn well that the neighbors were trying to make this conversion. I mean, can that be established?
I have no knowledge of that.
So if they knew, I think we might not. So we might not, it might be a situation where it's not unfair to kind of like stop everything and say, well, wait a minute, let's talk to these neighborhoods.
Again, you're in a legislative mode. I mean, I'm not going to try to play lawyer here, but you're in a legislative mode dealing with legislation and not quasi-judicial where you're dealing with a specific site. You would be quasi-judicial if you're dealing with these as individual zone conversions. Just a process call that I think we ought to pay attention to.
But I understand what Councilor Winter's frustration is, but also I'm concerned about actually doing it blanket wide if it really just one problem we're trying to solve. I don't know what the answer is.
Thank you. Mr. Melendres.
Madam President, Council, I want to clarify just one more time. I've stated it once, but I think it can't be overstated that as has been discussed here, this resolution, even with the two amendments, its effect would be the same as the city limits of the city. It would have a citywide effect. The types of properties that would impact would change a little bit depending on whether or not the amendments pass. But when this council is acting tonight, you should be voting on this bill with the citywide perspective and not focused on the impact on any individual property. If you can't vote in that manner, then we would need to address the process that we're going through here tonight.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? We still have several questions, but we have several people signed up to speak, so I think we need to go to public comment first. So, Lynn Anderson.
I am still awake. President Pena and councilors, my name is Lynn Anderson, and I'm representing tonight NAIOP, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. Even with the suggested amendments that we have been able to review in the short time span, this bill still opens the door to unintended consequences, which has been eloquently said, and eliminates predictability in the development process. The whole reason for the IDO. My executive committee asked me to speak against this resolution. Councilor Winter has been very gracious to meet and talk with us and has offered several suggested solutions. But in the final analysis, we believe there is real danger that the resolution will slow, if not halt, development citywide, particularly along main corridors. 120 properties requested zone changes in Phase 1. I'm told that now the count is over 1,300 properties have already requested zone changes for Phase 2. The private sector has no idea where these are located or if they will be approved, relying on the resolution, which then would indeed slow development. We respect Councilor Winter's concern that the neighborhood submitted a request that was not handled in a timely manner. However, the developer acted in good faith, meeting with the neighborhood and revising his plans to accommodate their request. He has agreed to meet with them again to see if he can accommodate additional changes. If a building permit had not been granted, regardless when it was submitted, the same situation would have existed for the developer. There is a process in the IDO for neighborhoods to appeal the permit to the City Council. NAIOP urges the Council to vote against this bill and preserve the predictability of the whole process for neighborhoods as well as for landowners, investors, and developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Ortega, followed by Jeff Bland, followed by Dan Reagan.
Madam President, I'm Joe Ortega. I'm Senior Vice President of Yes Housing. And with all due respect, we stand here in opposition to this bill. It would have very detrimental effect on one of the developments that we're working on in north of downtown, the Hope Works project. The way that the bill is written would cast uncertainty on that project, and redevelopment is difficult. It's when you're looking at doing this type of work, where you're taking properties in transition. Oftentimes they're smaller properties. You're trying to get more density into them to meet public purpose, and these types of bills just basically throw that all out the window. We ask that you consider this and that you vote no on this ordinance or this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Bland?
Madam President, councilors, thank you for giving some time to speak this evening. I'm here to express my support for Resolution 157. I'm here along with several other community members that are affected by the IDO. As already discussed, the planning department says they put in precise methods to address this, but when these precise methods have failed because of the delay and the stalling of our conversions, something needs to be done about that. We opted into the conversion process in good faith, and we're not requesting development be stopped. We're just seeking our conversion have its due process that it's deserved. So, part of the IDO's purpose was to implement, high quality development while also protecting communities' visions and development. Without these neighborhood edge restrictions, a lot of the community's vision for development will be affected. So please vote in favor of Resolution 157. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Reagan? Followed by Jim Strozier, followed by Sue Flint.
Thank you, Council President and councilors. I'm here representing a neighborhood association, Knapp Heights, and also the District 4 Coalition Zoning and Development Committee. The city process in establishing the IDO was not to identify the actual use of properties in this city. It was to use a convoluted version of conversion zoning that left some 1,500 single-family homes zoned as non-residential. The city process to fix this lack of reality in its brand-new IDO that was set to have everything tied down was to set up a two-phase, no-cost zone conversion process that will not be completed until sometime this fall, if then, some 15 to 16 months after the IDO became effective. This zone conversion process allows residential properties to have some newly created neighborhood edge protections. The city owns this problem. You own this problem, lock, stock, and barrel, because you voted the IDO into place. Developers are in the process of developing some properties that will violate the neighborhood edge protections of the residential areas which are in the queue for this zone development before the zone conversion decision is made in the city's process. By no measure that I know of would it be fair or equitable for the city to allow the denial of these neighborhood edges to those residents who are in queue. I am part of the District 4 Coalition. Today I received notification from Consensus that they were filing their application.
Madam President, can I give him a few more seconds, please?
Sure.
That, to me, is getting it in under the wire to create their own position of the neighborhoods shall not have what they need.
Our next speaker is Jim Strozier.
Thank you. Madam President and councilors, I'm here this evening to speak against Resolution 19-157. My concerns, a lot of them you've heard in the previous discussion and comments made by Director Campbell. I think this is not an appropriate way to address concerns with a specific project. The IDO has a process to address concerns with specific projects. It includes participation in a facilitated meeting, reviewing the application, potentially having additional meetings, expressing their opinion at a hearing if one is so required, and then ultimately appealing the decision if they're unsatisfied. It impacts projects that have already spent considerable amount of time in the process. And one of the things that I think is important for you to recognize is that when someone makes an application, that's not just filling out some paperwork and turning in a form. We have, in this case, for a site development plan, we have architectural drawings, we have engineering drawings, we have submitted for hydrology's review with the grading and drainage plan. We have a Fire 1 plan that's been reviewed and approved by the Fire Marshal's office. There is a lot of work that goes into getting to the point where you make an application, and there's an extensive process that leads up to that application. And so I don't think it's fair to change the rules midstream. The Phase 2 voluntary conversion process has taken longer than anticipated. And I don't think that's not okay, but those zone changes don't become effective until that process is complete. We can't act like it's complete when it's not. And so I appreciate the amendments that Councilor Jones has proposed. I still think that this bill is bad public policy and urge you to vote against it. But if you're going to vote for it, please include the amendments.
Councilor Winter.
Mr. Strozier, I've got some questions for you.
Okay.
So we have 1,000 folks in one batch and 120 in another batch that applied for the neighborhood edge provisions. And I assume you worked on the IDO and you had your input on the IDO. Are we making anything up or putting anything in this IDO that, as far as neighborhood protection, that wasn't in there?
Madam President, Councilor Winter, the neighborhood edge provisions that are being sought to apply to those properties that are in the process but not complete, you are correct. Those provisions are within the IDO.
So we had that. So do you think the neighborhoods in those 1,000 people and 120, they did anything wrong or in a timely manner that they submitted those provisions?
I don't think they did anything wrong, Madam President.
And so
Councilor
they didn't
Winter.
anything wrong because they did it in the timeline. Am I correct on that?
Well, I think we all have to recognize it's the city's timeline that we're talking about.
Absolutely, and they did it in
It went
their
from the
time.
EPC to now.
It doesn't
and it's
matter.
still
It
not
wasn't the
done.
neighborhood fault that 3 months it was held up in somebody's office, was it?
It's not.
So, Mr.
the
Strozier, so this is a
neighbors.
win-lose situation. So you think the developers, this probably nobody's fault, wasn't yours fault, wasn't the
Wasn't my
neighborhood's
fault,
fault?
no.
Exactly. And so we've made this a win-lose situation, and so naturally, because you're saying, and Mr. Campbell too, that you can't change the process, where the process is to protect the neighborhoods as it is the developers, correct? That's what the whole IDO was, to make it easier, make everybody understand the rules. And they played by the rules. So now we're saying the neighborhood should suffer and not the developers, and it's nobody's fault. It's because they did what they were supposed to do. You all did what you all were supposed to do. It would have probably been the better way is everybody got together to see if they could solve the problem where we had a win-win situation. But that didn't happen. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President.
Is
just
it
wanna-
for the public comment? Because we just have one more speaker signed
Oh,
up. I
I'm
thought-
sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry. Sue Flint.
Well, this bill, I want to say thank you. The only protection I've had in my community is because of you and Don Marie. This developer that just spoke, as well as this city planner, you know, he's out there with Lynn Anderson talking. And he comes in here and says, we can't do this. We sat here. We spoke on the IDO. We heard how the developers came after the public when the public was asking to be protected at the time the IDO was in front of us. We had the developers stand up like the Kurt Brownings, like the Silvermans, like Strozier, who is somebody who has gained. This makes me extremely angry because this is why I decided to go to law school. You have violated so many things in the IDO, in my eyes. But this will take the protection of the neighborhood. My neighborhood was not protected. We are out of this. We can't do the conversion. We have a developer who sits on the process manual board, has worked his way in with Jim Strozier to protect themselves. My community suffered and is still suffering. These other communities, these other neighborhoods need the chance to be protected. And when you hear them say that this is wrong, who is it wrong for? The people that this planning director took the IDO award and stood in front of EPC and held them for NAIOP? I'll tell you, that was the most obscene thing that I'd ever seen in front of a meeting that was on Jim Strozier's properties. I am appalled that this isn't a citywide thing. People need to be protected. You look at all the development that's happening now. You look at your areas. Some of you are missing the effects of it. Some of us aren't. You've got an Albuquerque Development Commissioner who's used his position. You have the EPC that's full of developers. You have no idea, because that's what I was talking about, that breach of good faith that you have with the city process and you. This is a great deal for the public.
Councillor Borrego.
Ms. Flint, I would just like to say that, you know, I tried to slow the IDO down because I anticipated some of these issues. And, you know, I'm upset as much as you are, because I think what we're seeing is the unintended consequences of a situation that we are not able to be predictable to either the neighborhoods or the developers. And that is not, that's just wrong.
Councillor Sanchez.
I'd like to move to suspend the rules once again until 11:30 p.m.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. So we're back on the bill. Councillor Gibson, yes.
Thank you, Madam President. So the failure is not the IDO. The failure is that we did not perform as we promised. Somehow there was a backlog of these conversion requests that did not get processed. And I hope that we have a cure for that going forward, first of all. And second of all, I would just hope that this council would, you know, not pass this, because I think it would do a lot of things. I think that it would set a dangerous precedent that could be used going forward. I'm really concerned about the potential projects that it could negatively affect. We've already heard about one very important project that we do not want to see slowed down or not completed because we're highly invested in that. This council is highly invested in that project. I am, let me couch what I just said, all of that I strongly believe in, but I also am not without compassion for the people who live in the neighborhoods and many of whom are here tonight. I think that you deserved an answer. I'm also told, though, that not all of the conversions were about neighborhood edge, the neighborhood edge provision, but that there were a variety of conversions, and some of which were in fact commercial. But that being said, I still think that you did deserve a response to your conversion requests, and so anyway, we can't fix that. We can't fix that with this resolution. Thank you.
Madam President.
Councilor Winter.
So the response that this councilor's given is we're sacrificing these neighborhoods that have done everything right and put their application in according to the IDO that we worked on, we passed with input from everybody, even though it's wrong, because of unintended consequence, we're sacrificing these neighborhoods. That does not send a good message out there. And, a lot of times we see neighborhoods that come in the back door. These neighborhood people did everything right. It wasn't their fault. And so immediately the developers come up and say, well, we did everything. We've worked on this for a year and stuff. They did everything right according to what they could do and what they were supposed to do, and we're sacrificing them. And that's the problem that I have. I'm not saying it's right for anybody. It's a win-lose situation, and always in a win-lose situation, it's the neighborhoods that lose. So that's it. I think what we vote on, take it and vote on the amendments, and I know if the first one passes and the second one passes, then it's pretty much a done deal.
Councilor Benton.
Just quickly, Madam President, I have to respond to what's being said about the IDO itself. There seemed to have been an administrative holdup here that is not the same as the IDO. So that wasn't an unintended consequence. I'm concerned that with this next batch that we don't have the same thing happen, but we should not be confused about that this was a failure of the actual system that was designed.
Thank you. So with that, we will, I'll go back to Councilor Jones for her amendment. So I'm not real sure which one's first. So is the shorter one, Councilor Jones? I guess you can go ahead and.
I think I have it for amendment number 1, which is on page 2, starting on line 28, add the following text to section 1.
Okay.
I move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes for floor amendment number 1.
And floor amendment number 2 is on page 3, line 3, add a new section 2 and renumber accordingly.
Okay, there's a
Move approval.
motion and, is there a second? There's a motion and a second for. You just did. There's a motion and a second by Councilor Sanchez for floor amendment number 2. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are back on the bill. Councilor Winter to close.
So, councilors, I guess it's beating a dead horse, and I really don't understand the council for this. I don't. We've worked with neighborhoods. I've worked with neighborhoods and developers for 20 years, and I always have tried to do the right thing. And when you have neighborhoods that do the right thing and are getting punished, then there's something wrong with what we're doing. I urge your support.
There's a motion and a second for R-157. All those in favor say yes. All those in favor say yes. All those opposed, no? No. The motion fails. So we are now on Counselor Benton, P2.
Thank you, Madam President. I move a deferral to August 5th.
Second?
There's a motion and a second for deferral of P2 to August 5th. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Sorry,
Counselor-
Madam President, we had a speaker on that last item. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sue Flint.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were on that bill.
Oh, that's okay.
This is on the redistricting. The redistricting in my area is something that I actually started investigating in 2011 when it was brought in. I don't believe that the city needs to, or the city council needs to redistrict. The consequences are great if you don't know what's happening in the districts that you split up. Councilman Winter came into District 4 when Debbie O'Malley was actually my district councilwoman at that time. What ended up happening is Del Rey Mobile Home Park had tried to go in and redevelop, and that's Kurt Browning. When they didn't get their way, shortly after, they moved to have redistricting brought in. When redistricting happened at that time, Councilman Benton's area changed, Councilwoman O'Malley's changed, Councilman Winter came in. I used to get so angry at Councilman Winter because Councilman Winter didn't know what was west of I-25 on that district change. And when it changed my area. We were under the North Valley Comprehensive Plan, and we were protected under that. When the redistricting happening, that changed everything. You know, you've got Kurt Browning that came in and got a metropolitan redevelopment plan because he said the area was blighted. It wasn't blighted. It was under the North Valley Comprehensive Plan that made it rural. So he was able to come in here and change it. I'm not for redistricting, and it has nothing to do that I think that somebody's not doing their job right. I think that it's unfair, and there needs to be more of an analysis done. And the consensus, you know, when I think about a consensus, I think about, are we looking at the new apartments that were built that actually come in? How do we know that we need to redistrict this and have two more? And the money-wise, I don't think that's right. I think you do a great job representing your districts the way that they are, and I don't think you need to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bedno, 58.
Thank you, Madam President. I move approval of O-1958. This is the redevelopment bonds for the Spring Hill Suites Metropolitan Redevelopment. Spring Hill Suites Metropolitan Redevelopment bonds, authorizing the sale of bonds Series 2020 in the maximum principal amount of $26,400,000 to provide funds to finance a portion of the cost of the construction of the project.
Here's a motion and a second for O58. Anyone signed up to speak? Any counselors have any questions?
And
Counselor Becker,
councilors, just quickly urge your support. This is the project that is at. There are two projects here in the redevelopment area. This is the one that will also provide a Ronald McDonald's house for adjacent to the Presbyterian Hospital.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. Move approval of O-1959. This is relating to the redevelopment, leasing, sale of MR redevelopment project and the issuance of bonds for the project entitled Highlands North Metropolitan Redevelopment Bond Application. And this one is in a maximum principal amount of $20,500,000 for the construction of a portion of the cost of the construction of the project.
There's a motion and a second. Anyone signed up to speak? Any comments from the counselors? Seeing none, Councilor Benton to close.
Urge your support.
All those in favor of 059 say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll move approval of 01961. This is creating a new section 21 of Chapter 14, ROA 1994, as amended for purposes of establishing the Affordable Housing Implementing Ordinance. And Ms. Lewick has patiently stuck around with us. She can give you a quick understanding. I think it's important that we have a brief explanation. Marty, thanks for
Let me go to Councillor
being
Sanchez
with
first.
us.
Thank you. Hopefully, for one last time, I move to suspend the rules and extend the meeting till 11:45 p.m.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Madam President, Councillor Benton, councilors, 061 is basically the second half of what was formerly the Workforce Housing Trust Ordinance, or the Workforce Opportunity Act. And it is the portion, it's being pulled off on its own to basically comply with the State Housing Act, which set up regulations and rules for state housing programs throughout the state. They mandated the Mortgage Finance Authority be the agent in charge of all these regulations, and it just sets forth minimums. I'm trying to talk fast because I know we don't got a lot of time. It sets forth minimum standards of who can apply to be a housing developer, that cities are empowered to donate land, they can give money, and can help with infrastructure for affordable housing. So this is just kind of the general overview of the State Housing Act, and when we get to the next ordinance, that's going to be where the rubber hits the road.
So, Madam President,
Councillor Benton.
since we're on these and they are related, why don't we just go ahead and talk about the next ordinance, and then we can
Absolutely.
vote on them one at a time.
Okay, Madam
062.
President, Councillor Benton, councilors, the next ordinance, 1962, is the one that actually does amend the city's Workforce Housing Opportunity Act, and there are some significant provisions to it. The biggest provision or change is that the permanent affordability requirement for home ownership has been removed, and what has been established instead is what's called a repayment plan, wherein homeowners can, potential homeowners can get up to $20,000 in assistance for a down payment and maybe for some particular renovations, you know, whatever it is that they need. And at that point in time, that is it. There's no more equity share. There are no more $50,000 down payment assistance programs, which happened in the past, unfortunately. And the money will be returned to the city in full. So that will allow another homeowner to go out and purchase, another potential homeowner go out and purchase a home. The other thing it does is it changes the income debt ratio to, increases it to 35%, so that the total income to debt ratio for a household would be what is considered a qualified mortgage, which means lenders take into account the total amount of debt that the person has versus just the 30% for housing. So if there's car payments, if there's student loans that they're repaying, if it exceeds 35%, they would not qualify for a qualified mortgage. This protects people from going into default on their homes. I think the other is it does continue to maintain the permanent affordability for rental housing. There are no changes there. And I think I'll stand for questions. I worked on this so long, I don't remember what's in it.
Well, Madam President, and speaking of working on it so long, I appreciate that, Marty, and you sticking with us and helping, because nobody could have done as good a job as you have on this. And also want to thank our city Department of Community Service, Family Community Services staff, and the Mortgage Finance Authority staff. We really worked well together as a team to get to this point, so appreciate that very much.
Yeah, Counselor, thank you for mentioning it, Madam President. Also, there were a number of nonprofit developers in on the discussions. We had a series of meetings. We also worked with the housing advocates. It was, I would say, I looked at the list and there were, between any given meeting, 12 to 20 people involved in affordable housing, working on changes to the ordinance to make it better. So thank you, yes. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego.
Just a quick question. The resale of a house or property that's a land trust, could you just address that, please?
Madam President, Councilor Borrego, a land trust is exempt from it. I'm sorry, it's late. A land trust is exempt from that because the purpose of a land trust is to be permanently affordable. This is for the houses to be sold on the open market, not related, and the complexities of trying to sell in that market and maintain permanent affordability is, ugh.
Councilor Benton.
I heard your support.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second for 06.
We do have an
Is there
amendment, Councilor
amendment?
Benton?
61, pardon me?
An amendment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, is it in the book or do we? The amendment is in the bill book, I believe. I'll move floor amendment number 1 to 061, and this is just covering our bases with prohibiting discrimination in affordable housing. So on page 12, line 30, after the word state, insert the following, and city. That's what I move floor amendment number 1.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Back on the bill as amended. There's a motion and a second for 061. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Hearing the bills together, we now have 062. Councilor Benton, did you want?
Thank you, Madam President. I move a due pass of 062, amending Chapter 14, Article 9, ROA 1994, as amended, the Workforce Housing Opportunity Act.
There's a motion and a second for 062. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Councilor Sanchez and Benton, R 160.
Thank you, Madam President. This is R-19-116. I'd like to move deferral until the August 5th meeting, and that's adopting a proposition to be submitted to the voters at the next municipal election concerning the renewal of a 0.25% transportation infrastructure gross receipts tax.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for a deferral, but before we take the vote, I'd like to ask Mr. Aguilar, would we still have time to make amendments to this if we at the next meeting?
Madam President, yes.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion and a second for deferral until August 5th. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. R 163, Councilor Harrison Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam President. This is R-19-163. That is amending the adopted capital implementation program of the City of Albuquerque by approving new projects, supplementing current appropriations, and changing the scope of existing projects. I move we do pass.
There's a motion and a second for a due pass of R 163. Anybody signed up to speak? Any comments from any of the councilors? No. Councilor Sanchez Harris to close.
Urge your support.
There's a motion and a second for, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. R-170 is approving and authorizing the acceptance of grant funds from the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund and providing an appropriation to the legal department for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. I move a due pass. There's a motion and a second for a due pass. Any questions, comments? All those in favor say yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item is R-171, approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. There's a motion and a second for approval of R-171. This has just been modified to say advisory, sorry. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. That 069, we did that, so there be no further business. Oh, my Lord, this meeting is adjourned.